And put a little order in this. So we're going to ask the petitioners to come up and speak to the petition and give them 10 minutes for yourself and whoever else you want to speak on your behalf for the petitions. And then we'll reserve time after that for the board to ask questions, or if the board wants to hear from anybody else. We won't be taking public comments from unless the board, somebody in the audience, and the board can ask for whoever they want to, obviously. But so if the board identifies somebody to speak, we'll listen to them. So we're going to try 10 minutes. We've heard all these petitions before, so we're not plowing new ground here. So 10 minutes with the petitioners, and then the board will ask any questions or listen to any other speakers that they want to hear, either pro or against the petitions themselves. Okay, and once again, let's observe all rules of courtesy and kindness and respect. I just ask you to be nice to people. So the first one is a discussion and voting proposed rule, the amendment to SCB Rule 183-1-12-.12, tabulating results. Subject to the rules, hand counting presentation from Charlene Alexander and Janelle King, member of the board, Janelle King.
I'm a 34-year resident of Fayette County, and I want to make it very clear that every time I have presented a petition, I am presenting it as an individual and not on behalf of any organization or any other individual. I find it amazing that since most of us in many of our counties on this hand count of ballots, we did it. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've heard from a number of counties that we used to always hand count. Since 2020, we hand counted the ballots on election day, and we also did it during early voting. So I don't understand why this big uproar is going on, and we didn't think that it added that much time. One thing I do want to say is there's a lot of misunderstanding of this rule. We are not saying that we are tabulating those ballots. We are strictly counting the number of ballots that come out of that scanner. And I'm going to show you something because I don't understand how this goes. But let's say this is a stack of ballots, all right? Paper might be a little bit thicker. All you're going to do is you can take a finger glove or a stop quick, that licky stuff, and all you're going to do is these are going to come in, they're going to be upside down. You could be looking at the back, it doesn't matter. You're pulling them out of a pile, and you're strictly going to go to the corner, and you're just going to count those ballots. Now, how difficult is that? That is not a big deal. I mean, in my opinion, that's not a big deal. So, and you should be thankful. I mean, if everything is so good, and we're back there and we are counting these ballots and 3 of them come up with the same amount and it agrees with the scanner, great. Have you ever heard the term cross-check, which we have in the airlines, we have all over the place? Cross-check means that we are verifying a set of numbers or a discussion by using another means. That's all we're doing. We are strictly saying that the ballots came out of the scanner, and we are going to say, this is the total number of ballots. It is not that difficult. I don't know why you keep saying that there's going to be errors. You put them in stacks of 50 and cross-lay them. The reason you do that is as you put those stacks of 50 together and you count them and you go to the total count, let's say you come up and one of you has 1 or 2 different than the other 2. It's very easy to go through a stack of 50 and find the one that's missing. That has happened, but you keep going until you have it. So I think there's just been a whole lot of misunderstanding about this rule. You're blowing it way out of proportion. I have been a poll worker, poll watcher, and I've been an assistant manager. I have done these counts, and I just don't understand why you're fighting it like you are. The taxpayers pay you to do your job, and you want to ensure that everything is correct. That's all we're asking, is that you are double checking the ballots that came out. I'm going to turn this over since we're under a 10-minute guideline, and we've discussed this many times. I have the good fortune that one of several co-authors of the Help America Vote Act is here with us today. And I'm going to introduce Mr. Harry Hari, and he's going to explain to you the concepts of chain of custody as well as paper audit trails. Thank you.
As introduced, my name is Harry Howry. I've been active in elections since the 1990s. Most people don't know it, but the Help America Vote Act was written by people from Missouri, and I happen to be from Missouri. That was John Ashcroft and Paul DeGregorio and one private individual that was a casual cyber and operational consultant. That was me. So there were hundreds of people involved. We got involved first in Bush v. Gore. And the goal of the Help America Vote Act was very simple. We didn't want to have litigation. We wanted to have a pristine election system. The concept behind HAVA, or the Help America Vote Act, was to create a system that was self-proving. That implies the ability to audit and reconcile. What we find here across the whole country is a lack of reconciliation or control points. Anybody that has an experience in auditing, and I have both financial auditing experience and cyber forensic auditing experience, knows that you have to have control measures so that you can figure out what happened when there's an error. Most people don't understand this, but in 2022, the official election results in Georgia still have a 39,000 vote discrepancy between the official number of voters and the official number of votes. I am not saying that that was an error in the count. I'm saying that the control systems are not working. There have been a lot of things done in Georgia to improve the situation. I will acknowledge that we have professionals that have no particular iron in the fire that are doing election work all over the country. We have to acknowledge their professionalism, but at the same time, as Alexander Hamilton and James Madison started, they said our election system is intrinsically adversarial. It is designed so that I don't have to trust you and you don't have to trust me as Republicans or Democrats, and neither one of us have to trust the bureaucrats. That is the way the system was designed. We get caught up in this whole narrative that somehow we're insulting or replacing the election workers. There are a lot of great people out there. They should be, congratulated on the great work that they do. But at the same time, we have to have provable systems. This is about provable systems. One of the easiest places to start the reconciliation is by comparing the number of ballots manually to what the machines are telling us we have. It's easier to find the error at the beginning than it is at the end. Who has ever tried to balance a whole year's worth of journal entries or accounting entries for their small business? You don't do it at the end, you do it at the beginning, or else you're going to have many sleepless nights as you try to reconcile the two. The example with the banking system of counting and recounting the money is an example of zero trust. I don't have to trust the cashier or the teller, and they don't have to trust me. Both of us compare the results. And when they don't agree, what do? We figure out why they don't agree on the spot, and it's solved. Now, the estimate, I don't want to impugn the numbers, but the idea that to do what we're talking about, simply counting the ballots, takes 65 cents a ballot is outrageous. It's not going to take 65 cents a ballot to do this kind of counting. It's not going to interfere or impugn. If the mechanical systems are correct, great. But we'll know for sure that starting the process of counting and tabulating the ballots starts from a good and sound foundation. We have this problem in many, many other ways, but the idea that we break chain of custody by simply opening a system and counting them is nonsense. You might need sign-offs, you might need attestations, you may need dual oversight to make sure that nobody's doing anything that they shouldn't be doing, but we do this all the time. We do it with adjudication, we do it with provisional reconciliation. And then we have things like mail-in ballots that we're not doing anything with to determine whether all the mail-in ballots even got into the system to count. So I would recommend very strongly that this is not an abrogation of chain of custody. If it's done properly, it's a very small impediment to the system, a very small amount of labor, and it gives you a very good reconciliation of the count of the ballots in the system. And from our perspective, my perspective, any type of system that improves accountability and improves auditability, which is a requirement, by the way, under HAVA, all auditable items are supposed to be maintained. What does that mean, all auditable items? It actually is a performance-based standard. It's saying that if you can audit this item, you have to maintain the information to be able to audit the item. It makes no other sense otherwise. You don't create an audit system, you don't create a financial control system by arbitrarily saying, well, we're going to monitor our memos and our journal entries, but we're not going to pay any attention at all to accounts payable. This is what we're talking about here. Controls that make sure that the system is pristine and clean from the beginning. If it costs a little bit of money, this is an issue, obviously, that has to be grappled with. But the fact of the matter is, a non-provable election is what is eating the country up right now. We have to protect all of the people's rights. This isn't about denying entry into the system. This is about making sure that we come up with a result that we all can trust. And I would suggest that you all consider strongly passing these particular resolutions.
I'm gonna stay here.
So Alexander, you have about a minute left.
Okay, you're going to ask questions?
Well, the board then will, if they have
Okay.
questions, they'll ask them.
The other thing that we have to keep in mind is we're not counting the ballots every single day. And I know there've been a lot of numbers that have been tossed out. I've looked at the numbers, the ones that I could get. Understand that when we're talking about whether it's election day or early voting, we are talking about drilling it down from registered voters to estimated turnout. And then you are breaking it down by the precincts, and you're taking it on down to election day. You all know that roughly 20% vote on election day. You take that, Fulton County, 432 precincts, take that 20% of your turnout and divide it by 432. Trust me, there were not any precincts that I found in 22 in Fulton that were over 1,700 people showed up on election day. We're not talking about doing 5,000 on one day. If so, 3 is the minimum. 3 is the minimum. You can always bring in more, as long as we can control them. So that's my minute.
Thank you, Ms. Alexander. Are there comments from the board or questions from the board? Member Gazal, and I ask the board, please, one at a time, and I'll try and keep an eye on who wants to speak and keep this an orderly process.
Has anybody conducted a survey of precincts across the state to understand whether or not there's even the physical capacity? Because this is one of the concerns that I've heard from election supervisors, that they just don't have the space to do this in a way that is secure. Have you spoken with election supervisors about the implementation of this?
Yes, not all of them, of course. There's some that won't even talk to me, but have I talked to the ones that I know? And I've watched it happen in my county and in some of our surrounding counties. And you're just not talking about a big deal. You have to have tables to bring the people in. And so you check them in. You've got tables there where you've used the poll pads. You can move the poll pads off, and that's what you do as soon as you close the polls. And you've got tables right there. We're not asking people to turn those ballots up so you can see them. It's however they come out of the scanner. You're just going to take and put them so that you can count them. Do I think we did it? I mean, I don't understand, because across the state, most of the counties in 2020 up through October of 2022, they did exactly what these rules asked for. And we didn't hear any complaints then about not having room.
The complaints that I've heard are that the late date, the resources, the time, and the fact that there are extremely strict statutory requirements of getting other information uploaded to the state. And that has been the reason that I understand the state recommended not doing this at the precinct, is because it was was not done in a way that was accurate. There were problems with it. They tried this and it failed. And I am going to defer to the 159 counties and the election experts who actually conduct elections and have done so for decades. And I'm going to rely on their expertise, because I have not conducted an election. I know a lot. I'm an attorney. I'm an election law attorney. I've observed elections across the globe. And I know that the 159 counties have professionals that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to. I think that the aspersions that have been cast.
We're not going to cheer for election officials today.
The aspersions that have been cast upon our election professionals, who are wholly nonpartisan, to suggest that they are partisan actors because they articulate the problems that they're facing, is a gross understanding of what the burdens and duties of election officials are. And, sorry, I don't mean to get y'all in trouble. And the fact of the matter is, if we pass a rule, they're required to adhere to it, and they're telling us that they can't. They're telling us that this is a problem. We're hearing that this is also beyond the scope of our statutory authority. So I understand chain of custody. I understand the checks and balances very well. And I know that reconciliation is conducted throughout the day, comparing voters checked in, comparing ballots that are printed out, and the number of ballots that have been scanned into the tabulator. That is cross-checked multiple times throughout the day to suggest that we don't believe in reconciliation, because this rule that would come into force the day before early voting starts is a gross mischaracterization.
Member King.
All right. I do have a question for you, Member Gazan. When you say they and all, are you stating that every election worker and official is against this rule? Well, I'm asking a question.
Wait,
I'm saying that everyone that I have heard from personally is against it. There may well be some who support this. I have not received any support from an election supervisor. I have not received any messages supporting this from an election supervisor. Poll workers, yes, but poll workers are not responsible for the entire county, and they will not be held responsible for violations of this rule.
So what you're saying is that your poll workers, there are some poll workers that are in support of this, the individuals that will actually have to do it. And then you're also saying that, are you not including Ms. Charlene as one of those election officials?
I'm talking about the people who actually run the elections and are responsible for running the elections day to day.
Okay.
And also, Ms. Alexander is here in her personal capacity, not representing the board.
Well, I would hope that there isn't anyone that's just standing up here representing everyone, especially when there are differences of opinions. That being said, just to be clear, this rule is referring to election day only, correct?
First one, yes, ma'am.
This rule, on average, as you stated, the 1,700 ballots that you saw that was in one precinct in Fulton County. that was
2022.
In
I mean,
2022. We did amend this rule, to be
Yes.
clear. This rule was an amendment that we basically said that those who have 750 ballots or more can come in the next day or the next business day, whichever, whatever, it is. Either way, they can come in and they can count throughout the certification week. That's how we amended it. When it comes to counting these ballots on election day, are we talking about an average of 250, 250? What's the average number of ballots that we have in each precinct?
I'd have to go back and look. I had to pull every precinct, and I pulled about 10 counties,
Okay.
Gwinnett, Fayette.
Okay.
And I don't know that I could tell you the average because it varies precinct to precinct
Of
in
the
each
10 that
county.
you pulled 10 counties of various different sizes, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Member Johnson?
Thank you for your presentation. First, let me address the issue of timing, since there were 30 speakers and everyone that was against the rules, I believe, expressed their concern about timing for passing this rule or any rule just before an election. First, I take pause with Gabrielle suggesting to alter the Administrative Procedures Act that says in rulemaking that rules are adopted and become effective in 20 days. It's not appropriate for Gabrielle to say we want it to be 60 days or 90 days. If that's the case, then there probably needs to be some legislative changes. But as far as passing rules close to an election, I did a little homework and I looked in our state election board rules. I think we have maybe 69 or 59 rules. And I'll share with you Rule 183.16.02, voter registration, was adopted on October 29th, 2009. Rule 183.6.04, accessibility for the elderly and handicapped, was passed on September 18th and made effective on October 8th. Rule 183.112.06, handling of voting systems, adopted on 10/18 and made effective on 11/7. Rule 183.12.08, logic and accuracy testing, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Rule 183.112.11, conducting elections, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Tabulating results, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Provisional ballots, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Handling spooled absentee ballots, adopted on 9/16/2020, effective 10/6/2020. Eligibility of application for absentee ballot, adopted on 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Notification of absentee ballot rejection, adopted 8/31/2020, effective 8/31/2020. Early absentee ballot processing, 9/22/2021, effective 10/12/2021. Audit, audit procedure, adopted on 9/24/2020, effective 10/14/2020. Emergency rules were adopted in 2020. Emergency Rule 183-14-0.06 through .14, that would be 8 rules, adopted on 4/15/2020, effective 4/15/2020, just before a primary. Rule 183-1-14.7 through .15, that would be 6 rules, effective, adopted 5/18/2020, and effective the same day. So, and there are more. So the hue and cry about how early or how late it is to be adopting these rules, I don't buy. This is, rulemaking is good any month of the year. And as I look through the rules, actually the rules are adopted and made effective throughout the year, every month of the year. There's no exception. A good rule is good. Now, when it's effective may have an effect on whether it applies to a particular election. But I think the concern about timing probably should be thought about a little more carefully. Now, as far as this particular petition, my question is, Mr. Howery, is the failure to count the paper ballots a failure of compliance with HAVA?
So there are many different ways that the objectives of HAVA can be met, but the idea that you can allow systems to ingest ballots without control points violates both HAVA and the security controls associated with the way that the machines are being used under the Federal Information Security Modernization Act. You're required under both of these to have auditability. And so when you dispense with anything that would provide control points, then you don't have auditability. This is a natural piece of auditing. So anybody that is familiar, CPAs or cyber people here, know what I'm talking about with regard to control points. So if you have no control points, you have no auditability. And so back to your question, if you don't have a mechanism of providing control over these systems, you don't comply with HAVA.
I'm not sure how we could have control if we're not counting the ballots at the point of opening the ballot box, where you're breaking the chain of custody.
Yeah, I agree. There's no way to do something quickly that would resolve this issue. This is a relatively light impact on the system. And it doesn't, there was a comment made about whether or not late rulemakings are appropriate. Generally speaking, when you're talking about enfranchising or disenfranchising people, this is where the judges generally get a little bit skittish about whether or not a late rulemaking is appropriate. But something that's purely operational like this with zero enfranchisement impact has no basis for delay. It simply does nothing to change the basic concept of counting the votes. Now you have to have chain of custody procedures that are protecting the ballots, but that's a foregone conclusion and already done in the existing system.
Thank you. So this rule would not impact voter experience.
No, it shouldn't at all.
Okay. I have read many complaints about a delay in the counting or delay in election night reporting. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the ballots that are counted on election night. It's the memory cards that are counted. And my understanding is runners take the memory cards to the election office, or to designated law enforcement, or to designated employees, election workers. I see an election worker shaking her head. But it's the memory cards that tabulation occurs with. Correct. Please.
No, not unless Dr. Johnson would like
We-
to hear from one of you.
Please. Sure.
Press your button so I can. right.
So thank you for hearing from me. Rebecca Anglin from Greene County. So this varies county by county. What my county does is not what a neighboring county does. Many counties do not have the ability to run the memory card or have these runners that you speak of or have sheriff's deputies. What I do in my county is not what my neighboring county does. They do not have the resources to do that. So to say that it would not cause delays on election night is not true or accurate. It will cause delays for certain counties. Now, my county does it one way and we will get our results in. What my neighboring county does, they do not have the resources to do it the same way I do it, and they have to wait at the precinct because the manager and both assistants, or the manager and one, because it has to be under dual control, they have to bring the results back. So you're waiting until everything has been counted. They have to keep those ballots with them and that memory card with them. That would break chain of custody if they did opposite of that. So if they do not stay together, fill out their chain of custody, have that memory card, have those ballots with them, and drive it back to precinct, you are waiting until all of this has been done election night before it gets back to that office. And you're talking about counties with multiple precincts. We're not talking about a small county. I'm in a small county. We're talking about counties with larger capacities and many precincts. If they're not implementing something like what I do at my county, you're talking about 12, 15, 20, 30 precincts that you are waiting on. It will definitely delay results on election night.
Whoop. I might have to get a bigger gavel.
So, so when the ballot box is open, the chain of custody is broken. And I have worked as a poll worker, and I have crawled into those ballot boxes to get the ballots out, and I see them strewn all over the floor, and it takes a certain amount of time just to do that, and to put them back together and tap them and get them straightened. It's not like the pristine pile that somebody walked up here with. It's like 52 card pickup. But I think that's the moment when these ballots could be put on the table and counted. And as I spoke last month, I looked at several counties at their election day ballot cast, and the numbers were not that great. And as the trend continues to move toward early in-person voting, the election day ballots cast actually becomes smaller and smaller. And so I think the time to do that and bring all the equipment together, that's what we're trying to work for. What I'm trying to work for is some uniformity. And if some counties are counting ballots and others are not, it's not uniform. Now, how you get them to the polling place, there's certainly options and choices for county supervisors to use. But counting the ballots, if you're not doing that, then I fear that we're not providing equal protection. Okay, and that's very important. That one county is providing the provable, auditable trail, and another county is not. And if you ever want to do an audit, a risk limiting audit, or if you need to do a recount and you have not counted those pieces of paper, and then you open the batch and the number of ballots is not the same, what do you do? How do you remedy that? What's the remedy? Because you didn't count it in the first place. How do you reconcile that? So there is a reason to have a cross check, a double check. There's a reason the ballots are being touched. I've heard complaints that, oh my gosh, so many hands touching the ballots. Well, I'll tell you what, their hands are touching the ballots, because I've been there on at the end of early voting and at the end of election night, and the ballots, you're dragging them out of that box and they're all over the floor, and there are a lot of hands touching them, but that's not bad. It's just that you're trying to restore the order and follow the process that's called for. But it's the perfect time to count the ballots anyway. And it's better to do it in the beginning than try to do it at the end when you don't have a remedy for a miscount. And yeah, you might get it wrong the first time. You counted 49 instead of 50, but you do it again until you get it right. It's easy, nothing to it. So, this petition, for rule, does not affect the voter experience. It does affect the election workers, and I appreciate the young man that said that he does count. But that means that if somebody else is not counting, we're not treating the election the same. We're not uniform in how we conduct the election. And we are tasked to make sure that there's uniformity in all of the counties. I'll yield.
Member Jeffries, you have any comments you'd like to make? Member King?
So during early voting, at the end of the night, let me backtrack. When I worked for the state party and I did data work, what would happen is at the end of early voting, we had a group of people who were going out doing door knocking. And so that we weren't disturbing people who had already voted, we would use the data from the Secretary of State's office that showed who had already voted early or submitted their absentee and remove them off of our rolls so that we would knock on their door because they've already voted. So during early voting process or early voting, at the end of each night, there was a form of reconciliation for those who were tracking data throughout the election process. We had, if something came up and there was a problem, you had a couple more days to address it in live time. And at that time, I was recently given a perfect example of why I think election day counting for sure is necessary. Here's why. So a gentleman, this is a true story. There was a gentleman who walked into their polling place. They voted, they got the printout, and then they asked if they could take a picture of their vote before they put it into the scanner. They were denied. Unfortunately, this man did something that's against the law, but he ran out and decided not to put his scanner, his document in the scanner, his ballot in the scanner. That would mean that the poll pad number would be different from the scanner number, right? So when we're talking about, so during early voting, if I saw that, I would have a couple more days to call and say, hey, why doesn't this number match? What's the problem? On election day, it's a little different. The data that will come up, obviously you have your certification week, but it's a little different. So I believe that particularly on election day, having one additional step to ensure that there's an understanding on a precinct level as to why our numbers are either matching or not matching, because that's an example of how the numbers could be a little off. And there are people that do not trust the machines. So there are people that would like to have a record of some sort of their ballot, although that's not permissible. But that particular situation could occur, and it can occur several times over. To Dr. Jan's point, should we not have those extra days like we do with early voting where we can go through, look at the data, see what's happened the day before, what happened a couple of days before? We're now at the mercy of addressing this issue on a statewide level. And that will cause, if we want to talk about chaos, I mean, we are still to this day talking about things that took place, not just in 2020, but also in 2018, because we're trying to comb through from a statewide level. So I personally, the reason why I amended this rule personally was because I did take into consideration the fact that people were working long hours. And I did feel like if you have over 750 ballots, now that number came from looking at the average that we discussed prior to amending of how many ballots at the most all the way down to the least per precinct. And what we found was that there was maybe 1,700 in one precinct in Fulton. I think the next greater number was 750. And then at that point, it dropped down to about 300 and it kept going.
300, 500.
Right, 300 to 500, and it just kept going. So that's why I amended that, because I did feel like counting 1,700 ballots after working 18 hours or 16 hours is a long time. So that was amended. That being said, I do not want to continue, and I say continue because as I listened to speakers, we had one speaker state that there was 31 counts of fraud, but then in the same conversation, the same message said that there was no fraud. And I get confused when I hear stuff like that. However, what I don't want to do is set a precedent that we are okay with speed over accuracy. A delay of any sort, whether it be a couple of hours, I can guarantee you as a voter, I would rather wait another hour to ensure that the count is accurate than to get a count or get a number within that hour, and then to find out at the close of an election, after certification has already taken place, that we have people suing because the count was not accurate. Not only that, we have people who are upset about the whole concept of the reasonable inquiry, but we're also saying that we do not want to ensure that our numbers are accurate enough to push these numbers to our county board members and then have them sign that legal document that they are held accountable for, that they will be charged with a felony if the count is incorrect, because the document says accurate and perfect. So I think that what we're doing is creating more stability in our election process. We're also putting our county board members in position to certify with confidence, since that's the big concern. And again, we're counting election day only ballots. If it extends it for a short period of time, let's do so that we can be accurate across the state. Now, I know there are counties that are doing this to perfection. I know that for a fact. And I am sorry that there is a slight impact on you because you have to almost bear the brunt of the counties that are not. However, to Dr. Jan's comments, uniformity does matter, and it does create foundational stability.
Any further comments from the board? Dr. Johnson?
Just to remind the attendees here, California counts their ballots, the largest state in the country. Illinois counts their ballots. Massachusetts and Alabama count their ballots, and all of Canada counts its ballots. This is not an unknown or an unused process as far as elections go. And this is the opportunity to pick up on the errors, such as perhaps an occasional machine malfunction, as reported in DeKalb County when the ballot design created a problem and the numbers came up wrong. If they had counted the ballots, they would have immediately recognized that there was a problem. So I think that's important to know. To share with this group, in the last presidential election, Columbia County on election day had ballot counts in the 300 to 400 range. That's not an unbearable number of ballots to count. Paulding County had ballot totals in the 500 to 700 range. Cobb County had 480 ballots average on election day. And similarly, actually during advanced voting, now I think 4 years ago, things may have been skewed toward absentee by mail because of COVID, but even during early voting, the number of ballots per day, per scanner, is very, very workable. Cherokee County had 287, with a large number of, at one precinct, of 1,400. So the checks that I could find suggest that this is not an unreasonable number. I think the delay would be warranted, and it would provide that auditable control feature that one would strive to have to be compliant with HAVA. And oddly enough, when we do a recount, the option is either now it's machine, but there can be a request for a hand count for a recount. So what are you doing? You're counting the ballots by hand. The RLA, or the audit that we're using now, is a hand count. It's also a tabulation, but you're also hand counting the ballots. So anyway, I will yield for others.
Any further comments by the board? Member Jeffries?
I'm good.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
I have a few comments,
Oh,
if you don't mind.
go ahead.
Ms. Alexander, I appreciate you submitting this petition. I really do. It's given this board a lot to think about. I think that there's some gold in it, a little bit of it. I disagree with some things that I want to talk about. And I've received more comments from this, I think, than any other rule that we've tried to pass so far. And if I were to count them, which I haven't, it would probably come up 50-50 pro and against, but the overwhelming number of election officials that have reached out to me have been opposed to this. And I, for one, greatly appreciate the comments made by the election officials, because they're the ones that have to run this election on a day-to-day basis and have to staff those facilities and hire those poll workers. And so I appreciate their comments, and they're the ones that have to deal with whatever rules we put into place. There are several things that concern me about this. Number one, I do think it's too close to the election. I do. I think that it's too late to train a lot of poll workers that have already started their training processes, and to go back and have to retrain them on something like this. I think there's a lack of resources in many counties to effectuate this rule, and the cost we hadn't discussed about the extra workers, the time for that, just hiring extra workers to do something like this if it's necessary. I think there's significant chain of custody issues, because now you're talking about if you wait till the second day to try and count these things, well, then you're putting them in a box, taking them someplace else, taking them out of a box, or counting them and putting them back in a box. It's just a lot of chain of custody issues I have concern over. But most importantly, I believe that this is not supported at all in statute. This body, this board is an administrative body. It's not a legislative body. If the legislature had wanted this, they would have put it in statute. It's not in statute. You can't read any place in statute where this is. This board is not here to make law. We're here to interpret law. And I don't see any place in statute where we're interpreting the hand counting of ballots after they come out of the machine. And therefore, I don't know if you're clapping for me or Waffle House, but that's okay. But it's just not supported in statute. We have received guidance from the Secretary of State and from the Attorney General's office that say it's not supported in statute. If this board votes to implement this rule, I think that we put ourselves in legal jeopardy by taking this rule. I think that the more appropriate course of action for this board would be to send a proposal to the legislature. If we believe in this, then let's send a proposal to the legislature and ask them to enact this. Let's let the legislature do their job. We don't need to do the job for them. That would be my comments on this. We know the legislature is not shy of passing laws, whether you like them or not. but they need to do their job. So this board needs to take seriously the guidance that we've received from the Attorney General, from the Secretary of State's office. And from the election professionals across the state that have opined on this particular rule. For that reason, I will oppose this. Like I said, I don't disagree with what you're trying to do. The mechanics of it bother me significantly, especially when it comes to statute. I will always follow the legislature on these types of issues.
What about HAVA? Do you agree that you should be compliant with HAVA and the other federal laws?
Well, I am going to pass the buck to the legislature on all of this. So, are there any comments from the board?
One further.
Yes, Dr. Johnson.
One further comment. In OCGA 21.2, the definition of ballot is 21.2.2 is ballot is official ballot or paper ballot. In 21.2.434, as the election code describes counting paper ballots, it says only official ballots shall be deposited in the ballot box and counted. 21.2.437 says after the polls have closed, the ballots shall then be counted one by one and a record made of the total. So one could argue that we do have an electronic voting system, Dominion, but it was sold to the state of Georgia that it produces a paper ballot. So indeed, we actually have a voting system that uses a paper ballot, and these statutes should apply. 434 and 437. After the polls have closed, the ballots shall then be counted one by one and a record made of the total. So if we're following that statute, because we tell the citizens of Georgia that we have paper ballots, then we're not following Georgia code. Now, there is a separate section that deals with ballot marking devices and the ballot summaries that are printed out, but we call those the official paper ballot. So we should be counting the paper ballots.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on that because counting a ballot and counting a piece of paper are two different things. And this rule has us counting a piece of paper. This rule has us counting pieces of paper, not counting ballots.
This is not tabulating. I'm not talking about tabulating. I'm talking about counting the ballots.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Member King.
I just want to point out that according to our Georgia code, the role of the state election board, part of our role is to promulgate rules and regulations to define uniform and non-discriminatory standards. As we stated several times, having some counties counting by hand and some counties not does not establish uniformity. This rule will do that, and we do have the ability to do that. We would not be breaking any statutes.
Well, it says in accordance with the law and with the existing statute, I believe. And if there's no statute support
Can
for
you show
this,
that to me, Mr. Chairman?
did you?
I just read
the-
it.
Did you read the
I
Attorney General's
just
opinion?
read it out loud. I'm not talking about the Attorney General's opinion. I'm talking about what is in our Georgia election code book.
Are there any further comments by this board? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adopt the petition by Ms. Alexander for Rule 183-1-12-.12, tabulating results.
We have a motion to adopt this rule. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Um,
Member Gazal?
As a matter of statutory interpretation, the provisions that deal with paper ballots predate even the DRE system. Those dealt with paper ballots that were deposited in a box that did not tabulate, and they do not apply currently. So just to make sure they do not apply to the current system.
We have precedent. We can do it.
Any further discussion? My last comment is this board voting affirmative, I want to make on the record that we'll be going against the advice of our legal counsel by voting in the affirmative. We will have no further discussion. We'll have a vote by voice.
Before we vote by voice, my discussion is that, Mr. Chairman, I have to point out that every time you make a statement that this could be against the law, you are welcoming lawsuits that will be dismissed. Lawsuits that we know will be dismissed. I just read in our code what we can and can't do. Undisputed. So I just want to be on record stating that I really am getting a little tired of encouraging lawsuits. We can vote.
I will not correct your comments. We have a motion and a second. We will vote by a voice vote by order of seniority. Member Gazal, how do you vote?
Nay.
Member Johnston, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member, how do you vote? Member King, how do you vote?
Aye.
The chair will exercise his right to vote and will vote nay. Motion passes 3-2. Not true. Not true.
Although we just were told that all those cases are dismissed.
What?
Gotta stop this.
Next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment to SEB Rule 183-1-14-.02, advanced voting subject to the rule absentee ballot. For whatever they want to say, anybody else that they have. I understand that people are raising their hands and want to speak. The way we're handling it today is if the board wants to ask a question of somebody from the audience and they have the opportunity to do that, we're just not going to take comments without questions from the board being asked. And the board obviously is free to ask whatever questions they feel is necessary to help them with their position on this. So, Mr. Cross, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr.
10
Chairman.
minutes.
Room's kind of cleared out a little bit. So as many of the proponents for these rules understand, we're getting a lot of flack from the press and opponents of election accuracy and security. And as my grandfather, World War II veteran, used to say, if you're taking flack, you know you're over the target. I am glad that Gavrio member Tony Adams brought up the Super Bowl. During the AFC Championship game on January 18th, 2015, between the New England Patriots and Indianapolis Colts, there was controversy centered around allegations that the Patriots had used underinflated footballs during the game, which they won 45-7. Following an investigation, the NFL concluded that the Patriots quarterback, Tom Brady, was generally aware of the deflation of footballs, leading to a 4-game suspension for Brady, fines and penalties against the Patriots, including the loss of draft picks. The case stirred significant media attention and legal battles over subsequent months. In response to what was called Deflategate, the NFL relatively quickly addressed the issues surrounding ball inflation, and the NFL implemented new rules and stricter protocols on ball handling and ball inflation for the 2015 season. Key changes included pregame ball inspections, random checks during games, and the use of more advanced technologies. The measures were implemented immediately for the 2015 season as part of NFL's effort to restore integrity and prevent any further controversies related to ball inflation. The objections that you've heard today have been filled with propaganda generated by the political media machine. Even today, the Secretary of State has conflated that simply counting the number of pieces of paper inside a machine is the same as tabulating by hand, and it'll take forever, and it'll be 3 o'clock in the morning before anybody gets home. For the people opposed to this, I say you have been duped by propaganda. I noticed that the Gavrio letter was created by Bartow County, Bartow County SharePoint program by Kirk J. That would be Joseph Kirk, elections director for Bartow County, who follows Brad Raffensperger around to swing states like an intern interviewing for a job, eager to please the secretary. The Secretary of State's office has had over 3.5 years, or 1,327 days, to fix outdated software on the system, 1,327 days to turn on the feature that prevents double counting of ballots, 1,327 days to do anything to make our elections more secure and reconcilable, and yet he has done 0. So with regard to these rules to make our elections more secure, if not now, when? So the ballot printing distinction rule, that's I think number 3 on your agenda today. Gavrio complains that distinguishing between different types of hand-marked paper ballots will do nothing to increase chain of custody. I say that's wrong. The distinction will help with chain of custody because if a county says that they issued 10,000 ballots or 10,000 absentee by mail ballots, we should be able to find 10,000 absentee by mail ballot images, not 10,500, not 10,600, but exactly 10,000. Instead, if we were to ask for absentee by mail images, we get those right now, plus emergency ballots, plus provisional ballot images all mixed in. Voting is supposed to be an exact measure. And today we do not have exact reconciliation. Gavrio goes on to whine that we have to send military and overseas ballots as early as this past Tuesday. UOCAVA ballots are emailed, all right? And then reproduced when they arrive back. So I don't know how this rule regarding printing physical ballots will have anything to do with an email ballot. Gavrio goes on to grieve that this rule will potentially violate the secrecy of ballots cast in small batches. I was a poll manager in Gwinnett County in 2022. I cast the one single provisional ballot for my voting location, and with my knowledge of ballots and ballot image data, I don't know how anyone would find my ballot to see how I voted because provisional and emergency ballots are grouped together and counted at the central precinct. This proposed rule is not about finding some secret backdoor to learn how somebody's cast a ballot. It is about rigid process control for elections, which should be an exact science. So the proposed rule does not impact voter experience, and it was passed by the SEB, I believe, 4-1. So I've got nothing else with regard to this particular rule. Hopefully I'm under 10 minutes.
You are, thank you. Any questions from the board on this? Member Gasol?
Mr. Cross, you do realize that provisional and emergency ballots that are designated for a precinct have that precinct designation on them, correct?
Okay.
And so even if it's tabulated back at the county headquarters, if you see the ballot image, you see the precinct designation. And somebody can easily go back and say, look at the numbered list of provisional voters, which is public record, the name, and they can say, David Cross cast a provisional ballot. And if it says provisional emergency ballot with your precinct designation, that's the only ballot that can be attached to you.
I would tell you that the probability of something like that happening is absurdly low. And again, this is not about trying to figure out how I voted or how you voted. I mean, when it comes down to it, if I really apply myself, there's a gentleman that's here that's it's an expert in technology named Clay Parikh. If I really wanted to, I could find out how everybody in this room voted. The technology exists to do that. So.
And it is the role of this board not to make that easier.
Okay, well, the state law right now does specify that those, that emergency and provisional is not supposed to be at the top of the ballot that says absentee by mail.
It is also the sole role of the Secretary of State to determine what is on the ballots. We have no jurisdiction, and this would be beyond the scope of our legal authority.
Okay, and as I said, he's had 1,327 days to do anything about making our elections more secure, and he's chosen to do nothing. Zero. He hasn't even updated the software.
Nonetheless, we can't change what the legislature has designated as is our authority. There's nothing we can do.
Okay, well, I'll remind you that, again, this rule passed, muster 4-1 previously. Thank you.
Yeah, that was to initiate rulemaking procedures.
I understand.
Yep. Any other comments from the board? Dr. Johnson?
Thank you. My opinion is that the state election board, we oftentimes say we need to do what is consistent with law. And Georgia election law states in 21-2-384 that the ballot, 383 says the ballot shall be marked, quote, official absentee ballot. That's all it said, end quote, and shall be substantially the same as other ballots. So I would recommend that the board vote to be compliant with the law, and the Secretary of State may take our lead and correct the absentee ballot labeling.
Member King?
I also think that we should be in compliance with the law, but I also like to take in consideration that these forms are often printed by the county, and in order for this to go into effect in 2024, we'll be impacting their budget. As of right now, the budget is already allocated, and what I would hate to do is to throw another line item on their budget without having the necessary time to prepare for it. But I do want to line up with the law, so I would support it, but I would not support it if it went into effect for 2024. I think it should go into effect for 2025 so that they can have an opportunity to adequately budget and budget it into their, or put it in their budget.
Any other comments by the board? I want to echo Member Gazal's comments. The under 21-250 powers and duties of the Secretary of State, subsection A1, the power of the Secretary of State is to determine the forms of nomination petitions, ballots, and other forms the Secretary of State is required to determine under this chapter, which leads me to believe that this board does not have jurisdiction to make this change. It's under the sole purview of the Secretary of State. And in my view, statute always trumps rules. And this is what the statute says.
Mr. Chair, I would differ that the statute 383 is the priority statute, that the ballot shall be marked official absentee ballot. Might I ask any of the election directors if they have already printed their emergency provisional ballots for election day? Rebecca, yeah.
Yes, mine are already printed and in office and sorted by precinct, so we're done with that.
So you have already ordered and printed those?
Yes, and our absentee as well. Everything's in.
Deidre?
Yes, ma'am, they're all printed, ready to go. We've already sent the your copies out, so yeah, they have. But I do want to say that, what the heading says, it does serve that purpose. That one ballot serves all three of those purposes, provisional and challenged as well. So it's the same ballot. It's just headed that way. You use it for three different purposes.
Again, but if I as a citizen am trying to reconcile how many absentee by mail ballots and differentiate those from provisional or from emergency, I can't do that. I just get like this big load of dirty laundry where it's all mixed together.
We always keep ours separated by what is absentee by mail, provisional, and challenged. So in Paulding, we know the difference in our ballots.
But if I do an open records request and try to pull the ballot images, is it going to be delineated that way for your county?
Should be, yeah. It's not.
Wait. The board needs to ask questions. The board.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step out of line.
Rebecca?
So if you did open records request for like an EMS report, it would show you how many provisionals, how many absentee by mail. You would be able to differentiate. And then if you also pulled recap sheets for each of those specific purposes, you would be able to differentiate. Now, the ballot itself is not going to say provisional on it, which is what I think you're alluding to. But we keep the ballots come in with stub numbers. So you've allocated ballots 0 through 3,000 for emergency, 3,001 to 3,050 for provisional, and so forth. So we definitely have chain of custody of all the ballots, and we definitely have processes for recording what is going where, and there's recap sheets accordingly. So everything is kept up with and documented. Now, whether or not a citizen would know to ask for those things could be a totally different argument.
Any further questions by the board? The chair will entertain a motion on this.
I would like to make the motion that we pass this rule, but that it does not go, so we can be in line with the law, but that it does not go into effect until 2025.
I don't think we can do that. Once this rule is passed, it'll be posted within 48 hours, and then 20
Can't
days later it
dictate
becomes in effect, so.
Okay, so then I'll amend my motion to table this so that we can reconsider it after the 2024 election.
We have a motion on the floor to table the rule number 183-1-12-.01 and for reconsideration at a later date. Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will all vote by order of seniority. Member Gazal?
Aye.
Member Johnston?
Nay.
Member Jeffries? Member King?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The motion passes 3-1.
You want me to stay up here and do the mail ballots with tracking, or do you want me to come back at 5
Give me
o'clock?
1 second here. Oh, you are next, aren't you?
Well, I was supposed to be number 1 and number 10. It was just kind of weird that I was like bookended on the initial.
I actually have you as 1 and 2 back to back.
Awesome.
We can wait till later if you want to.
Hell no.
I mean, it's your choice. I don't care. It's today or Monday, your choice.
Today's
Mr.
good.
Cross, you have 10 minutes, please.
I'll be brief. All right, mailing ballots with tracking rules, what we're talking about now. So regarding my proposal for tracking ballots by mail, Gavrio falsely claims that this rule, because it fails to increase chain of custody, enhance security, or improve transparency, and furthermore, it cites a law that does not exist. That was the primary objective. So right now, we have 0 chain of custody documentation when a ballot is mailed. Nothing. The county has no idea if a ballot is lost in the mail, thrown in the trash, or in a dead letter office, and the county keeps no records for public inspection. And even at your press conference this morning, it was mentioned that the fact that the mail is working so poorly right now that I think we had to extend 3 days, the number of days it was going to take to bring in ballots. I think it's awful that we live in a supposed first world nation and we can't get our mail on time. So this rule that I proposed enhances security because it will leave a paper trail showing what happened to a ballot when it's mailed. If you ordered toilet paper from Amazon, you get tracking real time and you get a picture of your toilet paper delivered to your door. Maybe we should have Amazon delivering our ballots. On transparency, it's simple. The people want accountability, and they want those records subject to open records request, which is OCGA 50-18-70. My rule as proposed clearly stated that the Board of Registrars or absentee ballot clerk shall mail by U.S. Postal Service or other delivery service which offers tracking. And in my proposal, I did write that the records shall be maintained pursuant to OCGA 50-17-70 instead of 50-18-70. And that typo should have been caught by the crack team of $400 per hour lawyers who could have had a first-year law student do the job and would have had it corrected to read 50-18-70. That was clearly a typo, and Joseph Kirk knows very well it was a typo, but he conflated it into something akin to they have no idea what they're talking about. And that tells you everything you need to know about Gavrio's authors, their perspective, and their intent on this matter. I will remind Gavrio that this rule also passed, this time 5-0 for movement to rulemaking. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution propaganda machine inaccurately reported that the cost to use U.S. Postal Service tracking is $4 per ballot. That is incorrect. It is free. I use tracking at my business using stamps.com, and I even get a discount on first-class postage. Furthermore, Georgia Code 212389 states that the postage required for mailing ballots to absentee electors as provided for in this article shall be paid for by the county municipality, except in cases where free mail delivery is furnished by the United States government. So like the ACLU folks and the ACLU army that's here today, I too, believe it or not, I believe that our elections should be easy, accessible, and accurate. I want to add the word accurate to that. So with this particular rule, I think it should pass. I think we should have the ability to track ballots. And also Mr. Kirk also mentioned that the wording on this particular rule, where it says mailed by U.S. Postal Service or other delivery service which offers tracking, doesn't necessarily obligate him to track the ballots, which again tells you what Gavrio's intent is and what their thought process is on this whole thing. So I think we should be using tracking. Like I said, Amazon tracks your toilet paper if you're ordering that, and everything's fully accountable. Right now, we have no tracking, no accountability. Thank you.
That's exactly the reason I don't use Amazon for my toilet paper. Mr. Doss, how do the counties track absentee ballots now?
Currently, with the absentee ballots, we will enter it into the voter registration system, which is Jarvis. We put in when the application was received, when the ballot has been issued, and when the ballot has been mailed. There are a few counties that actually use an absentee by mail service that actually processes our absentee ballots and mails them for us. Most counties, however, do the mailing themselves. So they will, once they have entered it into the voter registration system, they will hand package the ballots and either take them to the post office or take them to they may run postage themselves. They may take it to the county postage office that will actually enter the postage. Then when the ballots are returned to us, we also will then again enter it into the voter registration system as far as when the ballot is received. And then we will make the verification on the envelope to make sure that the oath is completed and whatnot, and we'll have that ballot as being received. I believe starting with this election, they're also offering ballot tracks from the Secretary of State's office that offers ballot tracks to also track the ballot. And I believe when this rule was originally proposed, ballot tracks was what was mainly discussed. With this rule talking about United States Postal Service or other delivery, I would question when you say that the post office offers free tracking. How do you go about getting that free tracking? Are you taking it to the post office and getting them to put the postage on the ballots? That's not what we do. With the military ballots, those are postage paid. They do not have to put postage on there when we mail those out. The other thing, about this rule, originally, when you proposed this rule, you had taken out the language during early voting, but this particular one, it's back in there again. We start mailing ballots before early voting starts. So this particular rule of tracking is we're not treating all ballots the same. We're not tracking the military ballots. We're not tracking the ballots that go out the week before early voting. We're only, apparently, according to this rule, only tracking during early voting.
Can I address that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's very simple. My admin goes down to the post office and she picks up this wad of stickers that look just like this, right? The top part you pull off and you put it onto your item that you're mailing. The bottom strip, you can pull it off and you can put it onto a spreadsheet next to a person's name, and that becomes the way that you're going to be able to track this thing. You can enter the numbers if you want, but it's probably just as good to use the stickers that are provided. But it's simple, it's free. You can go to the post office and say, I need all of your tracking stickers, and they will give them to you. It's a very simple process. And if you have folks that are going down to the post office and they're dropping those things off, this is a simple process. When they're putting the ballot, in the envelope, very simple process. Pull that, sticker off, put it on the ballot, pull the, the tracking sticker off, put it next to the person's name that they're working from, that they obviously have to be working from. And then when you take it to the post office, they're going to affix the postage and they're going to scan it with their little digital gun.
Member Gazal.
The first wave of absentee ballots will already be out by the time this would come into force. I will be the first person to stand in line to work with you hand in hand and go to the legislature and get them to write this into law. I think it's a great idea. I would love to see this happen. It can't happen. It just timing wise, it can't happen for this election. And again, it goes beyond what statute requires. We can't create a higher standard for the counties than what the legislature has already done. And the legislature has not yet said that the counties need to do the tracking. So we don't have the authority to do that. I hope that the legislature will listen and will write this into code. I will advocate for that. I will support you and anybody else who wants to work with us on this. But we can't do it in time for this election, and we can't do it as an appointed body by regulation.
I don't buy that, but thank you.
When we were all about to get together and sing Kumbaya, so Member King, Member Johnson.
Yes, question, Mr. Cross. The election mail is first-class mail, correct?
Yes,
And isn't first-class mail tracked automatically?
it is, but you have to instruct them to track it.
I mean, like
I don't
a phone
understand that.
call?
I'm sorry? First class mail is tracked if you use the process to track it. If you just slap a stamp on an envelope, maybe it gets there, maybe it doesn't. That's where we are right now. We are in the maybe it gets there, maybe it doesn't. And with the way that the post office is working right now and all the problems they have in Palmetto, I mean, if I was an election director, I think I'd want to know if I was mailing out 10,000 ballots, did they all get to where I mailed them to?
Member Gazal.
I'm sorry, I'm going to take a little bit of a point of personal privilege here. As Mr. Doss mentioned, there is a tracking service available, but voters have to opt in. And I want to use this opportunity, and I hope that some of the media will pick this up, that this opt-in is now available on every voter who applies for an absentee ballot on the MVP site. You can scroll down and opt into receiving text and or email alerts for every step of the way that your ballot is going through the process. You can receive a text when your application has been accepted. You'll receive a text when the ballot is mailed out. Some counties that use these third-party groups, third-party organizations that mail them will track it all the way through the mail because they have that barcode. It will track it all the way back, and you will get notifications. I strongly encourage any voter who is voting absentee, please opt into this so you can make sure that your ballot is received on time. So, thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Chris, I mean, I don't oppose this. I just oppose it on timing.
But if you put it into effect today, it's very simple.
Well, we can't put it into effect today.
Well, if you voted on it today and you said, yes, let's do it. You said, is it today or 48 hours? Because Dr. Johnson was
48
giving.
hours to post it and 20 days for it to go into effect.
I don't understand the discrepancy between the previous rules that were passed, in years past, and they went into effect immediately. Has something changed that makes it so that?
I don't know how that occurred. Yeah, I mean, there are emergency rules that can come into effect immediately. This isn't an emergency rule. I haven't filed as an emergency rule. I don't see how we can do this election, although I don't oppose it. I just oppose it on the timing issue, frankly.
I can appreciate that. The thing with ballot tracking for individuals, I should be putting premium gas into my car, okay, but I don't always do it. And I don't think I think voters are going to work the same way. Maybe they're going to, sign up for tracking. Maybe they won't. Most people are fairly busy with their lives, and they're probably not going to go to their county website and figure out how they're going to do ballot tracking. So it's a wonderful idea, but it's an idea that is a push from the voter. It is not something that the counties can actually give me a report and say, I mailed 10,000 ballots and 9,900 of them got to the places they were going to and 100 of them got returned. We need that kind of accountability and accuracy.
Member King?
So I'm okay with certain administrative procedures that would, may incur a little bit extra time. But where I do draw the line is when we're starting to affect county budgets. And once again, budgets have been set. And what we don't want to do is put a cost on our counties that they weren't prepared for, because then they're going to have to pull it from other places. And those where they're pulling it from could affect other aspects of the process. So I also agree. I am in the same vein as pretty much everyone here that this is something that I do think we should put into effect. I just don't think we should do it for this election because I don't want to impact their budgets any further. However, I really, really want to make sure that this is something that we can do for 2025 and onward.
Would you like to make a motion? The chair would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make the motion that we, again, table this so that we can discuss it after the 2024 election and hopefully pass it during that time so that this is something that we can put into effect in 2025 and ongoing.
Ms. King, there's no cost to do this.
There is a cost.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to defer this rule for consideration for a later date. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Member Johnson.
I don't understand the logic that the Secretary of State declares that they'll have a tracking program, and that's not, and that's okay or within the realm of the authority of the Secretary of State. But when the State Election Board entertains a petition for a rule for tracking, it's not within the authority of consistent with law. So I don't understand the logic there. It's okay if the Secretary of State does something, but not if the State Election Board considers something. And the the issue with the emergency rules is we had a whole slew of emergency rules that were passed that drastically affected how elections were conducted, to the extent of providing absentee ballot drop boxes throughout the state, to not requiring voter signature verification, to processing and opening absentee ballots while elections were going on actively, and created a gap in the system that would allow for double voting to occur. So, you know, the rules aren't always perfect, and they're not always timely, but rules are passed and they become effective, you know, 20 days later. And if it's too late to take effect, to be effective for this election or this period of time, it's still effective and should be used as soon as practicable. So I wouldn't hesitate to pass a rule if it's a good rule, and then the timing and implementation can take place as needed.
Mr. Chair, with respect, I believe this is an emergency. Senator Ossoff was on the news recently saying that we have terrible problems with delivery of mail, primarily attributed to what's going on with the new Palmetto facility. I believe this is an emergency. I believe this is something that should be taken action on today, because even when I originally mailed my rules to you back in May, one of them took 15 days to arrive because of the issues that are going on with the post office. I do believe we have an emergency right now. And considering the issues that are going on with the post office right now, if I was an election director, I would have very low confidence to know that all of the ballots that I mailed got to the intended recipients. Thank you.
Any additional comments on the board?
I would like to say, I would like Rebecca from Greene County, if you could just share, just to make sure I'm saying this correctly, what would the cost be to you? Because I'm assuming in order to, what you're picking up from the Postal Service, you still have to pay for that, right?
Zero. No, it is
They
zero.
hand it to you for
Excuse me.
free?
Yes.
Okay, let me just hear.
Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. So I personally took a ballot down to our local post office to inquire about tracking, because I agree with you 100%. Our mail service is in a disastrous state. We as election officials do not trust the mail. I have been working on this tirelessly to get counties to send me everything they are receiving that is delayed in mail, ballots we're having to reject. I've been doing this for months now. I agree with you. However, my postal office did not tell me anything about what you're talking about. And they told me it would be almost $10 a ballot to track it completely. From when I take it to the Postal Service, pay the additional fees it's going to cost, that would consume my entire fiscal year budget just for this election based off the absentee ballot applications we've received. And I would be over, but I would be in the red.
With respect, there are a lot of different ways that you can, when you go to the post office to ask for tracking. The tracking service that I'm advocating is the free tracking service. The one that you're talking about that costs $6 to $10 is where you're doing return receipt requests and, you know, and somebody has to show identity. That's a different type of tracking. The Postal Service has got many different ways for tracking. What I'm advocating is the most basic, most simple, free solution.
And to your point, though, I agree. We agree on several points of this, but I still don't trust the Postal
Okay.
Service to get them their
All
ballot.
right.
even.
Well, right now, you've got no way to track it.
I just
Member
want to be
King?
clear. Yeah, so I'm finding it hard to believe that there's anything that's 100% free. So I'm trying to find where the cost lies, right? Are you using a service, like stamps.com, or what service are you using?
So I use stamps.com. Stamps.com gives me a 5-cent discount on first class postage, and I can get tracking for free. It's
Okay.
just an option that's in the system.
So you would still have
Stamps.com
to
costs me
purchase.
$11 a month.
Okay, so it's $11 a month subscription, but you would still have to pay for that first class, like that 5 cent, that discounted rate, right? You still have to pay for that, and then you get your free tracking, correct? So there is a cost that's still associated with this per ballot. Okay, just want to make sure. Even though it's $11, adding any line item to a budget that has not already been
Any county that
prepared
wants it, I'll
for-
pay for
if
it.
I can just
get you
finish what I'm
that.
saying.
I think,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think that we need to fully understand the cost of this before we
I
move forward.
just want to make sure I know, even if it's $1, because I know it for my business, every single dollar is allocated. So that $1 sends you into the red if you don't have it budgeted. So I just want to make sure
Free.
we are.
Free.
We have a motion on the table and a second to defer this rule.
Can you make a
until- for
motion to
later
make
date.
it become an emergency ruling? Is that possible?
We have to vote on the original motion first.
Or you can rescind it.
Mr. Chairman.
Wait.
On emergency rulemaking, SB 202 made it significantly more difficult to undertake emergency rulemaking, and it requires imminent peril It requires notice to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, chairpersons of standing committees, legislative council, and the chief executive officer of each political party. It is an extremely high standard to meet an emergency under the statute because the legislature was unhappy with the emergency rulemaking that was undertaken in 2020. This does not meet that standard.
We have a motion before this board in a second. Any further discussion?
Could you repeat the motion?
The motion is to defer discussion and voting on SEB Rule 183-1-14-11. Hearing no further discussion, we'll vote in order of seniority. Member Gazal?
Aye.
Member Johnston?
Nay.
Member Jeffries? Member King?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1. This will be deferred for further consideration. Well, we get to skip over number 5 and number 6 since Ms. Alexander already presented to us. The next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment to SEB Rule 183-1-12.12, tabulating results subject to rule reconciliation reports presentation from Gail Lee and Janelle King. It's I don't know why it's on here.
I didn't work with Gail.
Okay.
All right. You're stuck with this one, Member King.
I don't mind. I don't mind.
It's tab number 7 in the board book. Yes, Gail, please. Ms. Lee. 10 minutes, Ms. Lee, for, do you have anybody else that you'd like to speak with you?
No.
No? Okay. You have the floor.
Well, I was surprised that I was on the agenda because I thought it had been adopted using the simple language that you added to it last time. But I want to take the opportunity to add maybe 3 more words.
We can't add anything to it at
You
this point.
can't?
No.
No? Okay. Well, in that case,
You can withdraw it and we can revise it.
maybe next time I'll take it off and amend it, but I think it should go into effect for this election. For those people who were not familiar with the rule, it's very simple. The election offices, within 30 days of certifying the election, supply the Secretary of State with a reconciliation report. And my role was just asking that it be posted on their website. And if they didn't have a website or a web page, then they would post it in their office. And the 3 words I wanted to add was in view of the public, because I don't want it to be posted inside a closet. So anyway,
Surely they wouldn't do that.
you never know. So anyway, that's all.
Is that it?
Yeah. Would you like me to read the rule?
No, we have it in front of us. I think that the board was in full favor of this last time, if I recall, for initiating rulemaking procedures. If the board doesn't want to ask any questions, I'm okay with that. The chair will entertain a motion on this rule. We have a motion to adopt this rule. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Rule 183-1-12.12, tabulating results. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will vote in order of seniority. Member Gazal.
Aye.
Member Johnston.
Aye.
Member Jeffries. Member King.
Aye.
The rule passes 4-0. You win a prize, Ms. Lee. I'm not sure what that is yet. I got a box of candy, I think. At this rate, we're going to get done by next Wednesday. The next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule SEB 183-1-12.19, preparation of electors list and use of electronic poll books, subject to the rule voter list presentation by Lucia Frazier. It's tab number 8 in your book. Ms. Frazier. Can you, how long is that going to take? Well, how long will it take? All right, see if you can make it work. Ms. Frazier, you have 10 minutes. You have somebody that's going to speak with you, I take it?
Yes,
Okay.
and it sounded like if I didn't
Or if I used like 5 minutes, I can have 5 minutes at the end too, is that after your discussion?
Well, no, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and the board will ask whatever questions of you that they
Okay,
deem necessary, so.
okay. Well, I
If
heard
there
you
are
say
questions.
to someone you have 1 minute left after your discussions, and so I just want to make sure, I'd like the opportunity at the end as well.
If you're nice.
Please.
Okay. Is this Pfeiffer Beach and Big Sur?
I'm sorry?
Is this Pfeiffer Beach and Big Sur?
Oh, I don't, this isn't me.
Okay.
I guess that's what this is, right? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely try. I don't have that. It's not mine. Oops. Yeah, that one looks like it. Awesome. Okay. All right, thank you, board. So this was for the certified list of electors before voting begins. And so just to briefly summarize kind of how we got here, this is something that the legislature it's already in our code to produce a certified elector list before voting. It has been something that has been easy to obtain in almost every election, except I think 2020, we have not still been able to obtain that. And according to sunshine laws, like I said before, all this election data is supposed to be open to the public. So just getting a certified elector list, like I said, is already something we do. And so this rule is just to help all the counties and the SOS to do that. And the counties have the ability to post this as well. And that's all I have, actually, because and then I think Mark would like to say a few words on that. Would you like?
We're going to give you more than 1 minute at the end then, since you were so short.
Hi, I'm Mark Davis. Been working with voter data since 1986, and I've been qualified and admitted to serve as an expert witness on voter data analytics and residency issues in a number of different cases over the last 22 years or so. And normally when I do one of those cases, I start with a certified copy of the qualified list of electors. And normally it's not too difficult to obtain, but there usually is a delay. And I know we've had a discussion going on about certification being ministerial versus otherwise, and so on and so forth. And the argument's been made that the proper venue for addressing problems in election that make it through the certification process would be immediately after the election in the form of a challenge to the election. And I'd like to suggest that we have a different way of viewing that, because there's been a number of times where candidates have come to a plaintiff's attorney with a prospective case, and I've been asked to review the data in the case, and there was no there. But I can't really reach that conclusion until I have that data, and sometimes there's a delay in getting it. And I just want to remind everybody that a candidate who wishes to challenge an election only has 5 days from certification to file that challenge. They can come back and they can amend it later. But what happens is the plaintiff's attorneys will end up filing a placeholder complaint while they end up doing the research, and that begins with subpoenas to the counties to obtain the data that they need, and so on and so forth. What I like about this rule is that it'll head that off, and it'll ensure that the data is available. And I think that's really critical, because as Lucia mentioned, in 2020, I put in an open records request on November the 24th for a certified copy of the qualified list of electors. I first got back a absentee voter file, which is not what I asked for. And when I objected to that, I got a supposed voter file that was supposedly in response to my request, but it was nothing like I'd ever seen before in 30 years of working with voter data. It was the voter file usually is at the time was about 62 fields. What I got was maybe 12 or 18. A lot of them were blank fields I didn't even recognize. It was basically just a hot mess. And I went round and round and round with the Secretary of State's office trying to get that replaced. I never succeeded. And I've spent the last 4 years trying to find anybody on the face of this planet who received a certified copy of the qualified list of electors for that election. I've been unable to find anybody. I'm to the point where I'm about ready to offer a reward for it. So I think it would be a great move. The OCGA 21-2-224 already mandates that the list be produced. We already know that it should be subject to an open records request, a simple open records request as opposed to a subpoena. But normally attorneys will, file subpoenas for them. I don't think any of that should be necessary. And if it's made publicly available, then we can head off some of these complaints that don't have merit. We can expedite the ones that do. And I've been involved in a case recently where, the legitimacy of a complaint was proven to the satisfaction of the county that was involved, and that didn't even lead to a hearing. The election was, tossed out and ordered redone because of the issues in the data. So for what it's worth, I fully support the rule. If any of you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
Member Gazal.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And I understand that you have deep experience in this and looking at the data. And and I appreciate the work you've done, identifying problems with districting and that sort of thing. My concern, I've got a couple of concerns with this. Just again, as a threshold issue, the Secretary of State is the sole authority to oversee our registration list under both federal and state law. We don't have the authority to do anything. But I'm also very concerned about having a static list this early in the process. And it is exacerbated by the problems we've been talking about with the postal system. When registration forms are mailed in, our registration deadline is a postmark deadline. So they can make it in the mail by October 7th, but they may not make it to the election offices until a week later. And then they have to be processed. And depending on what form of identification these voters have used, whether it's a driver's license number or the last four of their social security number, it could take another 5 days to clear all of the verification processes. So if this list is published before early voting starts, which with our timing would literally have to be published the day the rule comes into force, you've got a static list, which in reality in the back end is changing, because voters are going to be added to this list as they're being processed. And so when somebody who doesn't understand that process looks at this list and then looks at the list of actual voters, they say, we've got unregistered voters who are casting ballots. And that's exactly how disinformation gets started and gets spun up. And having a static list out there just makes it much more likely that people who don't understand what's going on perpetuate these myths. And that's what concerns me about that.
Well, I think Lucia wants to address that, but I think you're talking to me. So just real quickly, if we look at our interpretation of 224, the words before the election kind of stand out to me. And then we have to ask ourselves, is before the election when voting starts, or is it before election day? If we're talking about the 5 days before election day, then all of that should be put to bed, I would think, because the statute mandates that the list be produced 5 days before the election.
But the rule says before advance voting begins.
Correct. So it's before, the statute says before the election. And before the election, advance voting is the election. So that is why this rule says before advance voting. We do need a certified list, a stamp, a set in the ground, a line in the ground before in-person voting starts. And changes can be made. That is why there's such thing as a supplemental list. The certified list that even if you want to argue that it should be before election day, there are still changes those days before election day. And there's a supplemental list that is given to each poll of the people who didn't make it to that list. And so if you're worried about changes, you don't need to. There is an avenue for that. The supplemental list is on here too.
But again, it also says before the supplemental list before advance voting
Correct.
starts.
It's essentially, it would be like the supplemental list would probably be empty on that day, but that's where all the changes go. So as every day of early voting happens, if electors are added, which they do get added for the reasons like you said, when a person submits their registration on time, but if they're missing some fields, they have that time to remedy that, and they get added to the elector list. It would show up on this supplemental list, which would be a document that's always there showing us the updates. But at least we draw a line in the sand before voting starts.
Well, my final objection to this is the retention period of 10 years, which is 8 years beyond what statute allows. We cannot, in rulemaking, create higher, stricter standards for what the counties must adhere to than what the legislature has set. That is unlawful behavior on our part.
Well, the 10 years is current because the Secretary of State already has files for up to 10 years right now on there. For the absentee voter file, it goes back 10 years. So that is why that date, that much time was picked. And it's a reasonable amount of time. Even the North Carolina, they posted for 20 years, but I used our own Secretary of State's to see how much they keep data, and they at least keep it for 10 years.
They can do that by choice. We cannot force them to do that by rule.
The big distinction, yeah. And so it's a big distinction is that the statute's clear on the time limit on that. People can keep it as long as they want to. It's just what statute says.
Well, you can still put it into the rule, and, you know, if somebody is going to push back on that, then, I mean, that's a different story, but the recommending or putting a date on something is not saying, you don't have to not do that. You're not, you know, putting a date on it is okay.
Except the board doesn't need to put rules out there that are in direct contradiction to statute. And the statute will always trump rules. So that, you know, so we need, are you finished? And my issue with this is, in addition to that, is that once again, freely accessible link, and the code is pretty clear, 21.2.225, subsection C, that the Secretary of State gets to set a price for this. And it says, notwithstanding any other provision to law to the contrary, the Secretary of State shall establish a cost to be charged for such data. They have the right to do that under statute. And this board cannot dictate to the Secretary of State that they have to provide this for free. We can't do that. So.
What if they decide not to provide it at all? I mean, that's essentially what I encountered in 2020. To this day, I don't know anybody who can tell me who was and was not qualified to vote in the 2020 election.
Now, I can't address, I'm just saying that, like, this board can't force the Secretary of State to provide that list for free because the statute says that they can charge for it. And creating a rule that forces them to do that is in direct contradiction to statute. So
Well, what if we let them charge what they want, but have to make it available? I mean, all I'm getting at is that I don't think we can conscience being in a situation where we just can't get it.
But yeah, I don't disagree with you, and I'm just saying that we can't, the way this rule is written, it says that they have to provide it freely. And that's in direct contradiction to the statute, so, which is an
I
issue for me.
disagree that it's in total contradiction to the statute. You can say freely available, and you're not committing a crime by saying freely available. Okay, if they want to, they can follow suit, just like it was said earlier. You're making a rule, and the Secretary of State is supposed to provide it freely available, just like sunshine laws have said, and I've already proven that with all those statutes, and they should follow suit and follow the law.
That would be an issie for them, but this
But
board,
it's-
by creating this rule, would be in direct
You're
contradiction with.
enforcing the law by saying it's freely accessible.
Are there other comments from the board?
Yes, sir.
Member King?
Question, just so I'm clear, I know the code says that a link should be provided, but are you asking for a printed list to be posted? I just want to make sure I understand what the rule is asking for.
Accessible link is a link that would link to the list.
So, okay, so you're not asking for them to print off the list and
No.
put it up there. Another question is, what type of information would it have? Would it just be a name, first and last name, or what all is the data that would be available? Or
It is the voter, like as it is on today, minus the columns that the law prohibits, which those are like date of, year of birth is allowed, but date of birth is not. Driver's license is not allowed. Social Security is not allowed. So currently today, when you ask for a voter roll, they reduce the fields by what the law requires. We would need the same thing, that it would be given the same way as you get it today, but this is a certified list.
And would my address be posted?
Yes,
So it'd be a name,
as it is today.
so it's name, address, and year of birth.
Mhm.
Now, currently, just looking to our election officials, currently, you do provide the link the link is accessible, correct, to the SOS office so they can get it. And then once they go to that link, they will have to purchase this list. And what you're asking is that we remove the option of having to purchase it and make it free.
And at the county level, that is in your purview. The counties may post a link to their elector list and they can certify it as well.
Now, if you were to post that link to just, and if one, either Deidre or Rebecca, one of you can definitely jump in. I want you to answer this question to kind of piggyback off of what you were just saying. If the county was to post a link to this list, would you have to cover the cost through the Secretary of State, or how would that work?
So I honestly don't know how that would work, because as it stands right now, if somebody wants an electors list, whether it be countywide or statewide, a county office refers them to the Secretary of State's website and they purchase the list directly from the state. If a county office is doing this on their own, they have to collect the funds from the individual, and then we have to send the funds to the state. So many counties do not even opt to do that because we're like a second wheel in the process. So we just send everybody to the state to get the list.
So if they were to request a county list, just county, they still have to pay the $250 to you to go to the state?
So it's cheaper if you're just asking for your county list. I believe it's $50. But yes,
still a
if they
fee.
wanted an electors list, it would be the $50. Correct.
So posting it without having anyone, posting it for free would be circumventing the cost, basically.
Correct.
Basically, is that basically what you're saying?
And that's in their purview. They own the voter list. The Secretary of State is not requiring them to charge for it. You're allowed to have your electoral list publicly without charging for it. The Secretary of State does not demand that the counties charge.
Well,
It's your list.
It is our understanding
own.
that we charge for that list. That's always been the guidance provided to our office from the SOS office.
But
So to my knowledge, counties are not giving this list out for free when it's requested of the office.
Is there a statute that says, that supports that?
Looking.
My challenge with this is that I do feel like it does disenfranchise people who are not able to afford to pay the $50 or able to afford to pay the $250, depending on which list they're trying to obtain. That is a concern for me, because if it is supposed to be freely accessible and it's supposed to be open to the public, then I don't think it should be open to the public who can afford it. That's a challenge for me. However, I would like to know, I think we are in a bit of a gray area when it comes to trying to, overrule what's already set in place as it relates to having to purchase this list. So, I would love to give you time to, I want to make sure there's a law, there's a statute, there's something in place that says you have to charge. And if it's not, then I'm willing to further discuss this.
There is no law that I'm aware of that says you have to charge. And in fact, it's the opposite. With the sunshine laws, they should be freely available. Just because the Secretary of State is choosing to charge that's irrelevant to here, and it's irrelevant to a county because the county owns their own information. They are allowed to give it to you without charge.
But we're not talking about, the county's talking about the Secretary of State.
Well,
Well,
actually, I
talking-
am, yeah. Yeah, so
This rule's dealing with the Secretary of State.
that's what I was going to
both.
say. I think the challenge is that you have them both lumped in together, right?
Correct.
So it's like with this rule, we couldn't ask the county to do something without asking the Secretary of State. I don't know if we can demand that the Secretary of State changes their fees, but yes, Rebecca, you have your vote.
So we did fund the code section. So it's 21-225C, and it says it shall be the duty of the Secretary of State to furnish copies of such data as may be collected and maintained on electors whose names appear on the list of electors maintained by the Secretary of State pursuant to this article. And then it goes into the limitations and so forth. So
Right.
But
But
that same section talks about them having the right to set the price for it.
right.
But is that on the state level or is that county?
Well, it's our understanding that the state owns this data that we would be producing. It is the state's database.
So the state is providing it to the county for free.
Correct. Well, we don't pay a fee for the system that we use because we're using the statewide system, but it is the state's database.
So so the data is yours, but the system is theirs.
Correct. If you go to B, it kind of expounds upon that. All data collected and maintained on electors whose names appear on the list of electors maintained by the Secretary of State pursuant to this article. So all of this kind of covers the registration data, but it's lengthy because there's so many letters to this.
I'd like to make one additional point here. When I go to get a voter list from just a regular garden variety voter list from the state, there's an ordering process that I can go through on the website. Okay, but when I submit an open records request for a certified copy of the qualified list of electors, that goes through a different department, and it's a slightly smaller subset. For example, if you're 17 and a half, you can register to vote, but you can't go on the qualified list of electors till you turn 18. You can register to vote 2 weeks after the deadline, but you can't vote in that election, so you can't go on the qualified list of electors for that election either. So there is a subtle distinction here between just regular voter file that anybody's going to order off the website and this certified copy that we're talking about here. I just wanted to draw that distinction. So the way I read the statute, it's required, the state's required to produce that file anyway. So what we're basically saying here is, well, if it's required to be produced, make a copy available to the public.
The data that the counties send to the state is already compounded. It's already compiled, and organized, correct? You just you put it in their database, I'm assuming.
Well, we're
entering the voter registration information into the database. But one of the reasons why it is important for the state to produce this list is because of the PII that it does involve. All that has to be redacted before you put this out for the public. If you put this on a county level and you're letting counties do this, the likelihood of some of this slipping through or somebody not knowing what they're doing is great. Because I will tell you, I contact my county attorney anytime somebody messages us because I am afraid of doing something that I shouldn't be doing or sending out somebody's PII. So you have to make sure that this is redacted. That is the security level built in with the state file, because they have an individual that pulls this file, redacts the information, and then posts it publicly for them. Or if they wanted a printed file, they would get a printed file.
So it sounds to me that if this rule was written where it was asking that counties provide a redacted list that specifies what that redacted list can show freely,
They know that, yeah.
it may be easier to support, because when you're adding the Secretary of State into it, they do have the right to charge. So we couldn't tell them that they can't charge.
I think there's a lot of speculation going on right now. I think when you say the Secretary of State has the right to charge, that's true, they have the right to charge, but you're claiming that they own that data.
No. I just said, what I'm saying is the way the rule is written, it's written to the county and the Secretary of State, right?
Correct.
If you separated it to two rules, one that's just to the Secretary of State, that would be something that I absolutely can't support, because I don't see how we can tell them that they can't charge. But for the counties, you may have some footing, because counties may be able to provide this information as long as they understand that it needs to be adequately redacted. But the fact that it's all together is where there's some complications.
I guess as I said earlier, and it was said earlier in some comments on another rule, the Secretary of State can follow along the law. If you're saying freely accessible and you're including the Secretary of State in this, that is not against the law. They're breaking the law by charging for it, and that's in a different rule. We'll get to that.
I agree with you on that 100%.
So
I do not like that they're charging.
I don't see why this rule is really well written for what the law is now. It is taking the law into account 100%. And I don't think we should be changing ourselves to follow the law because somebody doesn't have the capability to produce it. They need to find the capability to produce it, because that's what the law is.
Well,
And
I don't think we're debating capability. I think what it is that you say the SOS will also post, right, freely. That line right there says that we are demanding the Secretary of State to get rid of the costs associated to this list, because there is an accessible link. However, once you click on it, you got to pay for it, right? So what I'm saying is the rule is demanding that the Secretary of State remove their costs, which according to the statute, they have the right to charge for it. So I don't know if we can tell them that they can no longer charge for this list. However, if this rule spoke to counties, with working with counties, there may be some room there, because I must say, I do have an issue with the possibility that this is disenfranchising voters, the public. I should not have to wait until I can find the $250 or even the $50 in order to receive information that I'm supposed to have freely accessible to me. I agree with you 1,000%. And I feel like a lot of I'm surprised that the ACLU hasn't already jumped on that, because this is a clear disenfranchisement to voters. So that being said, the only challenge I have is that you're also telling the Secretary of State's office that they can no longer charge for this when they do have a statute that says they can.
I agree with you on the charge. Again, just want to return to the distinction between the regular voter list and this certified list of electors, because as we know, the NVRA has a lockout period, a 90-day lockout period. So from what I understand, and the counties can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of changes to that data that gets saved up. And so if I come back after an election and I ask for a certified copy of the qualified list of electors, that's one set of data. But if I get given a regular voter file, what's going to happen, and you counties correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of you are going to save up a lot of your changes, and right after the election, you're making them like crazy. And so then what I'm asking for and what I'm getting are two different things. And I think we need to have a vehicle here where that certified copy of the qualified list of electors as a separate and distinct database or data set is created and available to the public, as opposed to just a regular garden variety voter list. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on the charges for that. And we've got neighboring states that don't charge at all.
This is something I think needs to go before the legislators to see if we can remove cost completely.
Deferring this would not do any good because we'd have to consider the rule as is for deferral. So the choice, I think, for this board is either accept it or reject it. And then if you want to work with her on an alternative rule, then that would be an option also going forward. So, or ask this board to present a proposal to the legislature to remove those costs. So,
Mr. Chair.
Member Johnson.
Yeah, I have several issues with the discussion that's just taking place. One is I'm concerned that this qualified electors list is unavailable to the public. I'm concerned that the qualified electors list is not available for public inspection, as I asked a month ago. I'm concerned that there's no list that we know of that has been provided to someone on request for the last 4 years. And I'm concerned that anybody that would have need of using an electors list in a court case does not have a properly certified list available.
Yep.
So these are problematic, and it's problematic because this is coming from the Secretary of State's office, or not coming from the Secretary of State's office. You know, I would like for them to be available to share the information they have or what they provide. But last month, when I asked Mr. Evans how I could come to the Secretary of State's office and review the electors list as written in 21-2-225, I was kind of politely told they didn't know how they could do that. But there's a law for that. How can anyone see who's on the voter list for their research or for maybe a contested election? This is a problem.
I would be willing to volunteer to help with this, and I'm also willing to help with the mail tracking issue. I actually built a mail tracking system for my business, for my clients. I'm very familiar with it. It's true and it's false that it has a cost and it's free. Both are true. We can talk about that later, but I'm willing to volunteer to help on both of these issues. So just wanted to offer that.
My issue is if you don't know who is qualified to vote, then how can you hold an election?
I thought we learned our lesson this morning.
And then when voters come in to vote, how do you know they're actually on some unknown qualified list that's unavailable? This is not the way to conduct elections. And this definitely is an issue that needs to be worked through. I would consider, I don't know if it would be possible, removing the requirement from the Secretary of State to provide the accessible list link and just ask the counties to provide a freely accessible link.
That would be a substantial change to the rule. I think that the Attorney General in past meetings already advised that we can't make substantial changes. We might could make some changes when we initiate rule petitions, but this rule needs to stand on its own for a vote today. And
Would it help
if substantial changes are made to it, then we could vote to deny it and make the changes and resubmit it at a future meeting.
Rather than denying it, could we make a motion that I work with them to see how we can make this rule work?
Well, we would need to deny this rule, and then you work with them going forward for a revised rule. Is what we need, which is what we've done in the past. This rule stands on its own. It's already been submitted and published and viewed by the public, and so we need to vote up or down on this rule, up or down or deferral on it. And but I understand what you're trying to do. The proper thing would be to deny this, and then you work with Ms. Frazier on a new rule that could be heard. They would incorporate the changes that you want.
Would the chair entertain the opinion that removing text doesn't substantially change the rule? It just reduces the ask?
Well, I think that we probably could have done that when we initiate rulemaking procedures on that part, but this is a final vote on a standing rule. And this rule has been published to the public already for comment.
I understand, but
And so
if it's
making a change today, I think I don't think we're allowed to do that. I don't think it's appropriate. Our paralegal agrees with that. Making changes today to any rule we're voting on, I don't think is appropriate at this meeting.
So just to be clear, what I am proposing, not making a motion yet, because I want to discuss it if we have to, proposing that I will work with you directly on helping to adjust the rule where we can be in a better position to support it, as well as I would personally contact the legislators to ask them if they can consider removing the costs associated to obtaining this information so that it does not disenfranchise those who cannot afford to purchase it, and to make it line up with the law.
Can I make one more suggestion? I don't know if this will help, but if you just were to remove the word freely, it's too significant of a change to just take the rule as is?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think we can make any changes to rules being voted on. We make changes during the petition period, we make changes during, beforehand, but when the rule comes before us, we need to vote on the rule as submitted. We made some changes to various rules when we were considering them for rulemaking procedures. But at this point, we need to vote an up or down or deferral on this existing rule, so.
And I think if we remove freely, it's right back to where it is anyway.
Yes, it's true, but I didn't know if we could just, when you're taking away versus adding.
But no,
The board would entertain a motion. The chair would entertain a motion.
So yeah, I would like to make a motion that we deny the rule as is. However, that I work with Ms. Lucia directly to help produce another rule similar to this one that will be, that we can support as the board, as well as I work with or contact our legislators to see if they will be willing to work on the cost that's associated to obtaining information that's supposed to be free to the public.
Yep, okay, the motion, we need to go ahead and just motion, vote on up or down motion, and then Ms. Fraser knows that you're available to work with her to.
I just want to make sure I
additional-
understand. I don't understand the motion, so.
Okay, it's going to be an up or down motion
Okay.
to deny the rule. And then Member King has volunteered graciously to work with you going forward to
And-
create a rule.
But the timing, I don't understand. So in previous cases, do I just have to do the 30-day period again and come to
Yes,
final
yes,
vote? Just
yeah.
one more 30-day period
Start
starting
over.
tomorrow?
No, no,
Well,
no.
when you have a rule, then we'll set a date to hear the rule, initiate rulemaking procedures, and then it'll be heard after that, so.
That's,
It won't happen before the election, no. It will not happen before the election.
Not for the 2024 election.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, like I said, the rule as is puts us in a very difficult position.
Yes. Do we have a motion then to deny the rule presented?
Yeah, I make a motion that we deny the rule that is presented.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to deny this rule as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we'll have a voice vote. We'll vote in order of seniority. Member Gazal.
Aye.
Member Johnston.
Aye.
Member Jeffries. Member King.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. This rule is denied. Y'all are in a rare treat today. You're going to get to hear Member Jeffries speak. Because he does have a voice, and the next rule to be considered by this board is discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment to SEB Rule 183-1-12-.21, county participation in totals reporting. Subject of the rule is daily reporting presentation by Member Rick Jeffries, and it is tab number 9 in the board's book. Oh, you want to speak? You want to speak?
I don't have to.
You have the floor, and we're going to hold you to 10 minutes.
Yes, don't worry. This rule is pretty simple. A lot of counties already do this. At the end of each day, once the votes start coming in, early voting, if you have a website, you will post how many people voted that day, how many absentee ballots came in that day. And if you don't have a website, you just got to post it and put it in the election center for people to see. And that's all it does. Mr. Jay?
Do you have anybody else that you'd like to speak on your behalf? Is there anybody out there that wants to oppose Member Jeffries? Anybody? Okay. We have a proposed rule before us. Any comments or questions from members of the board? Member Johnston?
My comment is that this is consistent with the statute as it is. It just posting allows it to be readily available to people that would be interested in the tracking the numbers.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Member Gazal?
Reviewing the Gabrielle comments, I think that it would behoove us in a future meeting to make sure that the reporting requirements are consistent across primaries and elections. But as they have no real objection to this, and I think the data is important, I think that it will be a step that we should take in a future meeting.
That it should include primaries?
We make sure it's consistent reporting requirements for primaries and general elections.
I'm just shocked that Member Jeffries didn't put that in his original rule, but any further comments from the board? Any questions? The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt this rule.
We have a motion from Member Johnson to adopt the rule as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion second from Member King to adopt the rule as presented. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will vote in rank order, voice vote. Member Gazal? How do you vote? Aye. Member Johnson?
Aye.
Member Jeffries abstains. Member King, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0.
Congratulations.
Now, we have a request for we have a motion made for a 10-minute comfort break. Do we have a second? We have a motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Motion carries 4-0. So moved. 10 minutes. We will begin back at 2:53 with or without you. Thank you.
Tabulation processes are taking place, including but not limited to the provisional ballot adjudication of ballots, closing of advanced voting equipment, verification and processing of mail-in ballots, memory card transferring regional or satellite check-in centers, and any election reconciliation processes. And, I just think this is good for transparency, as we've talked before. A couple of people have come up to me. I've heard more about different counties and their tabulation centers, and some of them have 5 and 6 and 7 rooms that they have things going on in, and some are big and huge and spread out, and everything in between. And that is why I put this rule forward.
I have a question. I'm sorry. The board recently provided some guidance on the number of poll watchers that are allowed in tabulating centers. I think you might be aware of that. Some guidance was sent. We said that it's not 2, as most people assume, but you're allowed 2 in the different areas determined by statute, and any other that the election director decided was necessary. You might recall that, Dr. Johnson? We sent some guidance back in the spring about that, because this question came up about how many poll watchers were allowed in the large tabulating centers. And people had assumed that there were only 2, but we said, no, it's 2 in each of the areas listed in statute. And then any more that the election director decided was necessary was the guidance that was sent out. Superintendent, yes. And so my question is, with that already being sent out by this board, why is there a necessity for this rule? Because we've already said that you can have more than 2 poll watchers.
Yeah, there are a couple of reasons that I still moved forward on this one. First of all, the original law said, I believe, because I don't have it now here, but it said such designated places shall include the check-in center or check-in area, the computer room, and the duplication area, etc., was what it said before. And so I just defined it with more locations. And the second thing is on the sending guidance to the superintendents. If you'll remember what happened with that, we discussed it after one of the meetings up here, and Alex was helping us with that. Alex could not get a list of the superintendents, the board members, from the Secretary of State. And so she sent all of the guidance letters out to the election supervisors. And I've asked 15 people from different counties, and 2 of them have actually gotten those board members have gotten that from the superintendents. And 13 of the counties have never received it. The superintendents haven't. So that was the reason. I think we had a conversation and had Alex involved before that I kept going with this.
Yeah, the board was sympathetic. If I recall, we passed this 3-1 to initiate. And after visiting Gwinnett County's tabulation center and realizing how big it was, and I realized that 2 poll watchers were certainly not sufficient to see everything happening there in some of these larger counties. We were agreed that more was needed, and that's the reason we sent out that guidance. I guess my question, though, is by passing your rule, are we then adding to what is written in statute? And is that an issue for us to add additional
Well,
locations?
This clearly, the law clearly was written before saying that there are, and other areas.
Yeah.
Actually, that's what it said. Exactly. It said, and other areas, and it was added such as the tabulation process. I mean, so it was added onto that because it just said, and only other areas. And my point is too, on the superintendents not getting that letter, is basically the letter didn't go out because nobody got it, or 13 out of 15 did not get it.
What if most of these things take place in one smaller area?
So, if you go back to the May meeting, and the original proposal that I put in, you have tabulation centers like Fulton County's new beautiful facility. It's 600,000 square feet. It's a lot of room. And literally, an example is in the warehouse that they do the tabulation, most of the tabulation. I was standing about in the middle of the warehouse, and it's like a very wide, but it's a rectangular shape. And I was standing in the middle, and nothing was going on in there. There were a couple of people at one end, and I was trying to get their attention. And the three of us were the only people in there. And I was going, hey, hey. And I don't want to say how I was yelling to get their attention, but I'm literally kind of yelled, and they didn't, neither one of them even were aware that I was making noise in the room. So it's just to give you a frame of reference. So like in the very back left-hand corner, they start the process with the mail-in ballots. And if you were standing halfway into the room, you wouldn't even be able to tell that they were doing something with ballots unless you knew that that was going on there.
All right, I have a question for Irwin County. Press your button, Irwin County. So how big is the space where all these processes take place?
I don't have the square feet in mind. Every county has it differently, but in my county, our layout, we in our main lobby, we process our absentee by mail ballots, perform our adjudication in open view of the public. Our tabulation room, even though it is indoors, it has a 8-foot by 20-foot window in order to allow people standing, even if they're not able to fit into the area where we are scanning, that they can observe fully at any
So
time.
you got a real small space.
We are a county of just over 6,000 voters, so we're the opposite end of the spectrum versus Atlanta. We wouldn't be able to fit 2 people in the room with whoever is scanning the absentee ballots and performing that processing, but there is adequate space for 20 people to easily observe everything within a space of 2 feet.
That's my question. So if Irwin County wasn't able to allow 2 people for each one of the space where each one of these processes took place, are
That's
they in
against,
violation of the rule?
it's against election code.
What?
That is against election code for them not to allow 2 people from each party.
Well, but you're saying 2 people from each party for each of these different areas.
So this isn't, let me back up. Let's go
Okay.
back up a sentence. Okay, it's going to make me read the whole stinking thing. In counties and municipalities using central count optical scanning vote tabulation equipment, the election superintendent shall allow each political party to appoint 2 poll watchers for each primary or election, each political body to appoint 2 poll watchers for each election, and each independent candidate, and each nonpartisan candidate to appoint 1 poll watcher for each election to serve in each of the locations designated by the election superintendent within the tabulating center. Such designated places. Now, so to my understanding, the way I read this, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, is that the check-in area, the computer room, and the duplication area, Georgia Codes says 2 per location. And I mean, I'm not giving him a hard time that he has small locations, but the location should be able to fit, by election code, should be able to fit the number of poll watchers too.
You read location, so that would imply the building itself. They are accessible to the location, and they have full sight and hearing access to the room itself as well, even if they physically can't fit into the room. There is a difference between room and location as statute reads.
Yeah. So what, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to accomplish your goals with the same of a very small county that just doesn't have much space. So, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. So wouldn't the fire code trump all of this? I mean, if there's not enough people, I mean, if there's too many people in the room because it's too small, that would be in violation of the fire code, correct? So what I would think is that this would, however this plays out, they would have to make the necessary adjustments in order to ensure that they're able to meet the statute without breaking the fire code, correct? So that, I think we're kind of debating semantics here, because you said that you do have enough space in that location for there to be two people and they can see.
They're within 2 feet of the room. There's just the
Yeah.
difference of there being a glass window. That's the only thing, and they can still see and hear everything
Okay.
occurring.
So you wouldn't have an issue implementing this. It's just that they won't necessarily be inside the room, but they'll be behind the glass.
That's the point of contention there. I'm all for this as long as we're not getting into semantics that they're having to be standing directly beside me due to space concerns, but we have provided access to allow for full observation by that many observers.
And you couldn't, considering how you have it set up right now, it is possible for there to be full observation in each of the steps that she's providing.
Correct.
Okay, so I
Mr.
think
Chair.
we're fine.
Member Gazal was next.
Go ahead.
Member Gazal.
So my concern is that we're replacing our judgment with that, with the discretion that the legislature has given to the superintendent. The way the statute reads is such other areas as the superintendent may deem necessary to assure the fair and honest procedures in the tabulating center. That is a delegation of authority directly to the superintendent. By writing this rule and defining what the superintendents must do, we are replacing our judgment with the discretion that has been given by the legislature to the superintendent. And that to me is an illegal or an unlawful assertion of authority that the legislature has not given to us. They've given the authority to determine which locations to allow observers directly to the superintendents by statute, clear law. That means that there is no room for us to regulate here.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but it said in such other areas
As the
before.
superintendent may deem. We are not superintendents. You are a member of the board. So it is up to your board to determine for your county what's appropriate, just like it's up to the superintendents in Irwin County and Greene County and Bartow County to determine what's appropriate and necessary in those counties.
And this gives them guidance to do that. This doesn't
This
say
is
they have to.
mandates. This
No, it
is a
doesn't.
mandate.
No, it doesn't.
Mr. Chair.
Member Johnson.
I think I think we're all overthinking this, and what we need to do is focus on the intent or the goal of poll watchers in the tabulating center, which is really to assure fair, honest procedures in the tabulating center. That is the goal. It is just a matter of providing meaningful observation as to the conduct of tabulation and the counting of the votes. So that involves visual and auditory meaningful observation. If it's a one-room schoolhouse that two people can see every process that's going on by turning a 360 circle, so be it. That's all you need. If it's a 600,000 square foot warehouse that takes 10 or 12 poll watchers, so be it. If it's an election office that has 10 separate rooms, such that you need many poll watchers to be available in 10 separate rooms to provide meaningful observation while tabulating is occurring, that's the way it should be. So the goal here, it's not the goal of how many square feet or how many human beings. The goal is to provide assurance of fair and honest procedures. And the tabulating center is basically just poll watching. So I really think we're overthinking this, and I think this is consistent with what the intent is from the tabulating and poll watcher statutes that we have.
I just think that the guidance that we had, I realize it may not have gotten out widespread, but I think the guidance that
No,
we gave earlier. in the year-
it literally
It's
was,
complicated. We
Yeah.
have a complicated system.
Yeah.
Okay. If we just had a few scanners and
Yeah.
a bunch of ballots, it wouldn't take very much. But we have a very complicated voting system with lots of different tasks and devices and things to watch. Plus, we have different methods of voting. So we have a whole absentee ballot processing tabulating area, we have duplication areas, we have vote review areas, we have election management server areas. So it's complicated.
And this board agrees. I mean,
Yeah.
we agreed in the guidance that we gave out that more than 2 poll
Right.
watchers was necessary in some areas.
But,
So we
you know,
agreed to that.
it may take more than what's in here, as the election superintendent may deem necessary. So I don't think this is restrictive or onerous. No, I do not think Irwin County needs to have, 18 poll watchers crowded in front of their, whatever, the window or whatever it is. But DeKalb County might, or Gwinnett County might. So I think we're overthinking what the goal of poll watchers for tabulating center means.
Any further
And-
comments from the board?
And one other thing, since we're using Gavrio as such a guiding force for us today, their ruling on this was neutral. They didn't even care enough about it to oppose it. So they just had nothing. It was neutral. Just
So some of my friends are for it and some of my friends are against it, with my friends. Any other comments by the board? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt this Rule 183-1-13-005, poll watchers for tabulating center.
We have a motion to adopt the rule SCB 183-1-13-005. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, we will vote by voice vote. Seniority first up.
I
Let's
just,
move this on.
I wanted to actually support what Member Johnston said, that poll watchers are critically important. Poll watchers and tabulation centers are critically important. Ballot monitors, which are separate and under actually a separate provision, separate statute, critically important members of the public that help reinforce the sanctity of our elections. I'm simply can't support this because I think it exceeds our legal authority.
Any further questions from the board? Comments from the board? We'll now vote by voice vote in order of seniority. Member Gazal?
Nay.
Member Johnston?
Aye.
Member Jeffries? Member King?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1.
thank you.
You're in third place now for the shortest. Okay. No, you're in third place. The next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment to SCB Rule 183-1-14-.02. Advanced voting, subject to the rural reconciliation presentation from Mr. Garland Favorito. It is tab number 11 in the board book. I have to warn you that when my voice goes, we're out for the rest of the day. So, projector. Which one's the retention? Is that the?
Hold on, just a minute. Oh, you gotta be able to vote in.
You want to do the storage of returns rule first?
Storage.
Yes, sir, if that would be okay. While Tamara's going to help me on the reconciliation rule, and she's parking the car right now.
Without dissent from the board, we will move that up to next on the agenda. So we will discussion of voting proposed rule amendment to SCB Rule 183-1-12-.13, storage of returns. Subject to the rule is a storage of returns presentation from Mr. Favorito. Thank you. And that is tab number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give me just a second to get this PowerPoint loaded up. While I'm doing that, I have good news for you. I think I'm going to be able to do all mine in 5-minute recap each.
Yeah,
so-
okay, I'm going to put that down someplace.
Okay, because I want to be in one of the top 3 places. Yeah, so, okay, great. These rules have already been approved unanimously, so I feel very little need to say much, and I really appreciate the support last time. They're not very controversial. So I want to start off with the reconciliation rule. Whoops, I got the wrong one. I beg your pardon. I want to start off with the retention rule. I'm not sure if this will display correctly. It displays a little bit differently than what you have, but you've got it. So I'm just going to run through this real quick in about 5 minutes. If y'all recall that the problem that we explained was that the memory card retention rule doesn't retain the ballot images, cast vote records, and audit logs that are on the memory cards long enough to comply with federal and state law. And the simple suggestion was to modify the rule to comply with the clear plain text of federal and state law. I want to thank Member Gonzalez for recognizing that this was a potential legal issue at our last meeting. And the simple thing that we have proposed is just simply to change the text of 183.112, where it says the election superintendent may use the memory cards for programming ballot scanner units for the next primary election or runoff, which could be 60 days or less. We are just recommending that the election superintendent shall retain the memory cards for a period of 24 months in accordance with Georgia law. We went through the federal and state law last time. State law says all primary election documents shall be preserved therein for a period of at least 24 months. And federal law says that every officer of election shall retain and preserve for a period of 22 months all records and papers which come into his possession relating to any act requisite to voting. Any act requisite to voting, I think, is the key there. We talked a little bit about what was on the ballot images, on the memory cards. That's all the key election data in its original format when it was scanned. It's got the in-person ballot images, raw cast vote records, and the audit logs. And these records are created automatically when the ballots are scanned to tabulate votes. So the way we left it last time was simply the issue of cost and who is going to pay for it. And I understand that's something that y'all have got to decide. And we talked about, there were some suggestions in which that we reviewed. I think one came from Gabrielle that we may only need to back up one, given that there are redundant cards in the scanner, we may only need one of them and not two to comply with the law. And we think that's fine. We're up here. And there was some question about bulk. We can't get bulk pricing, so we can't tell you how much these are cost. So I think maybe Executive Director Cohn may have done some research on that. But this is a one-time cost. Once you get enough cards in the system to rotate into a 2-year cycle, there's no further expense. And just in regards to cost, I would just leave you with two questions or 2 points. It's interesting to know, why weren't the costs to comply with the law included in the $100 million Secretary of State budget for the system? And regardless of who pays for the cards, we really believe that the rule has to be changed to comply with federal and state law. And that's all I have. It's pretty clear cut.
Are there any comments from the board on this? Member King?
Yeah, I would love it if, Mike, if you can share, I know you've been working with team as it relates to getting additional memory cards. Can you share an update on where we are on that?
Thank you, Member King. Where we are right now, we were trying to work with the Secretary of State on buying these cards, but they were pretty adamant about buying them through Dominion at $46 to $48 a piece, which I went to one of our local precincts during the election, saw the card. It was not a special card that Dominion has. It's one off the market. This had a Secretary of State's logo slapped on it. So it wasn't anything special. So I said, we need to go on the open market and bid it out and find the cheapest price so we can buy more of them to do what you're trying to do. And quite frankly, I was looking at trying to buy 3 of them with the monies that we have left over from the ballot auditing tool that you've heard about. 3 for each. Yeah, 3 for each precinct. And so I think it was 40-something thousand memory cards. Well, so basically it got wrapped around the axle because they keep wanting to hold the line that we need to go through Dominion, and I refuse to do so. So it's pretty much come down to this. We're not going to buy them right now until the session starts, and we're going to look to put that in the supplemental budget as a redirect from the monies left over and do it that way. And we'll go through a bidding process, which to your point, yes, we will be able to get cheaper pricing, and we'll buy it in bulk, and we'll save taxpayer money. And so we'll be a good steward of the money. And that's really where my heart is on all of it, is we should always be looking after your money.
Thank you. And if I could just address one point, I'd like Mr. Parikh to come up for a second since he is an expert on this. But the memory cards are not specific to Dominion. They're generic cards, just like I have a generic USB stick. It goes in the machine. It's interchangeable. So the concept that you've got to use a Dominion card is superficial. But I'd like Mr. Parikh, since he is familiar with 7 different voting systems, would you come up just for 1 minute and address that for the board, because they're going to be hearing this again and again.
So I just want to be brief on this as somebody who has tested the Dominion systems. And I'm going to state this about all election vendors that do this. They can put security controls in on the USB drives to only select certain storage devices. I know I did this on a classified network for the Department of Defense, and it can be restricted. but they have no controls to do this. I have personally tested these USB devices. I put files on them, harmless files, but they still didn't detect them. Georgia's government is wasting money by buying these overpriced USB devices. And if I can, one more comment on this. As a forensics person, and you heard Mr. Hari talk about having controls in a paper chain of custody, there's also what's called a digital chain of custody. And since you have electronic voting machines, that 24 months retention period is something that you should be doing to make your election process totally, completely audible. And so you do need to maintain these things for that period of time.
I just find it shocking that you would allege that any government would waste money. Yeah.
Mike, could you reiterate that the goal is to not purchase them at $46?
Absolutely. I think for the public's confidence as well, when you have Dominion feeding its own system, I think that breeds no confidence. So I think if you are out here buying them separate from them, they're independent, you're going to get a better confidence level out of the public as well. And so that's why we're steadfast in what we're doing. One question I would like to have you guys answer, though, you are looking at a 2-year period here. And I think with number of cards, we bought 3 and we got 1 already in the system. That's 4. That probably gets us through 1 year. So we actually need probably double that if you're going to get through 2 years. Am I wrong?
I'm not even sure it gets us through.
That depends. Here's the thing.
Well, you can sit there and we'll just turn on
Yeah,
your
we
mic.
turn the microphone. Yeah, you're there.
Yeah.
You're on.
So that depends on how
You got to push your button.
Technology, I'm lost with that stuff.
He's your technological expert.
Hit it again. Wow, okay.
Oh, yeah. There have been attorneys that say I don't know anything about printers, even though I've upset the United States government several times on printers in classified environments. But anyway, so to your point, here's the thing. There's several ways that you could store these. The main thing is you could actually take the data, create a forensic image and a hash, and store these on what's called a network storage system that would eventually move them off. Then you could recycle your USB cards, but you would want to do a low-level wipe, not just a quick write. So you ensure that the cards are clean, and you want to record this process. And that's something that's important because if I may sidestep, I've heard counties talk about how they can't do it because it's not capable, it failed. Did they have somebody from the outside audit their process? And that's an important thing when you do it. And that's what I'm saying. When you save the money, there's several ways you could save it. You could still reuse those cards, but you want to make sure that you keep the integrity of the data and it's stored securely and that you track your process. So you have a solid chain of custody.
Would you yield further? I have another question for you. So on these memory cards, if you've got all these ballots on there, the images, does it have some sort of timestamp on there that would go when you go to store it? How does that work?
All right.
For their help.
So there are timestamps that are created for those files, and those will stay. Now, the thing is once the file gets opened and you move it and you access it, those timestamps can change. I don't want to detract about, I believe me, I've done a lot of forensic stuff on election equipment, and some of them have been transferred incorrectly, and you'll get like a January 1st, 1970 date across everything. And that just says bad forensic steps. And now you got to start all over. The file should be encrypted on the inside. Your Dominion, so you have what's called a DVD file, which is encrypted and have all that, which can be easily decrypted, but we'll get into that when I come back to Georgia next time. So that file is encrypted, so it's going to maintain its file integrity as far as that until it's opened up and files are accessed. So if you're just copying in the standard network storage copy, it would not affect the timestamps.
Okay, so your solution would be then to buy enough of these cards to where you have enough to do 2 years of elections. So when that 3rd year comes, we can take one and dump all that off because it's not needed anymore anyway, right?
That sounds good, but I'm a technical person. I would have to have more data on the county structures, your number of machines and stuff like that to answer that.
Thank you.
It sounds like this is another one of those rules. It's a good rule. It's just a timing issue on when it needs to be implemented. And it ought to be implemented after the election this year when the legislature can appropriate funds for this thing so the counties don't have to come out of pocket on this. And so,
And Mr. Chairman, the question I would leave you with is, why isn't the Secretary of State paying for these cards if it's in violation of both federal and state law? He has a budget to do this, and this is chicken feed for the Secretary of State's budget. He should be coming in here volunteering to pay for these cards right now. He's seen this rule. They haven't looked at it.
I know you really don't want me to answer that question. As I said, it sounds to me like this is another one of those timing issues that needs to be considered after the election when we have confirmation from the legislature that they're going to pay for, which they apparently have, Executive Director Cohen had some conversations with them, are willing to discuss over there. So
Yeah, I think to answer your question, you were trying to get them to pay for it, but they want to pay $46 a memory card, and we would rather save money.
Yeah, I would say the Secretary of State should pay $46 if he wants to. The only difference that we can see in the card is that the card is an industrial grade card. The Dominion system card is apparently industrial grade, as near as we can tell, which is a little bit more expensive. It wouldn't be $5, probably be more in bulk, about 12. But we can't get the bulk prices. Only y'all can get.
No result.
There's a lot of security implications in sourcing something like this that's going into our election systems. I think like folks in Lebanon might have a word or two to say about sourcing where you get your things. But that's neither here nor there. I think at this point, I agreed to this because I think it is not a bad idea. I would like to see it restructured a little bit, but I agreed on the basis that I thought at the time we would be able to pay for it, and it's now clear that we cannot. So I think, I don't know whether we should table this or decline it at the moment, because there's one other change I would like to see in it, which is, I think that if we're going to maintain those cards, it's better to maintain them with a remainder of the all election documents that are being retained for the same period. I think that's cleaner. I think you're less likely to have somebody misplace them if you've got changes in the office. So rather than have them retained by the election supervisor, I think that they should be retained with all of the other records.
I think we would be very amenable to that.
Excellent.
Just to clear up something, I just want to make sure it's clear. Mike, can you speak to if we were to purchase outside of Dominion, the security and all that? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm just to be very clear for the public, everybody, we're not going for a bargain basement at the flea market, okay? We're going to go for there's reputable companies out there that are sourced here in America, and we'd be looking to buy from them. And by the way, these memory cards I've seen at the local precinct have a brand name on it, so we'll probably go for that same brand if we can get it, and then nobody can argue. And by the way, if you have those specs on that, the speed and the gigs, I know it's 16 gig, but I don't remember the speeds. If you could have that, pass that to me, I'd love to have that as well, so we can make sure we got it.
And just because you're stating, it's like with any of the major companies, they usually have what's called a VIP or a Gold Star agreement. So they get a discount anyway because you're going to buy bulk.
Yes.
So you can't, like Rob said, the state of Georgia should be able to get
DOAS.
You can get those industrial grade at a really good price.
That's right. That's right. That's what we will do.
Right.
That's the plan. So thank you. I appreciate your point.
And the fact that it's industrial grade, that ensures you that it's not a bargain basement memory card.
Any more questions from the board? Any comments? Is there Member Johnston?
Yes. So my concern about this is that these documents are the metadata or the complete electronic file is required currently with the statute. And I'm not confident that that is being retained today. And in fact, I think there are many counties that still do not produce ballot images or retain ballot images as required by law. So I really would urge this board to adopt this rule and require this for the upcoming election. And I think we have good information that this will be funded in the next session with the discounts that we're talking about right now.
Is it possible if we were to adopt it, how would it go into effect if we don't have the memory cards? Because the bidding process only starts in January. So if we adopt it, will it just sit until we have the memory cards and then they'll go into effect? How would that
No,
work?
if it's adopted today, it will go into effect prior to the election.
So how would they be able to carry it out?
It needs to be deferred. If you want it to pass again next year, it needs to be deferred until after the election. And I would suggest until we have confirmation that the legislature will fund this and pay for it. Or we end up with a situation where we've created a mandate that the counties has to pay for and that with no funding. So.
Yeah, I wonder, I don't know if we can adopt it without putting a cost on the county. Now at this point, it's going to fall on the counties to have to pay for it. We don't know what those additional memory cards, how many they would need either. So we don't know what their costs would be. And then they would have to go through their own bidding process, I guess, and try to locate it. And then each county may have a different set of cards, and it's not a uniform process if we were to adopt it now. But I do think maybe tabling it until it's been passed that we can go through the bidding process, get the memory cards, then we can send memory cards to the counties, and then we can pass this to store it.
Do you have a motion on that?
Well, first, I want to make sure Dr. Jan is, I know she's still thinking.
Well, while you're thinking, I did want to point out, since Dr. Johnston mentioned it, at the last session, I explained to you that we did a statewide survey of ballot images in 2021 after they were public record. And we found a total of 1.7 million original ballot images missing for the 2020 election in Georgia. So that's 1.7 million missing ballot images. Each one is a violation of both federal and state law. So this is a pretty critical thing for a government that has a $2 billion surplus to say they can't spend 20,000 on memory cards. That's a pretty severe problem.
Come on, come on.
I guess we're in a position where if we were to go that route, then we would end up with the Dominion cards. That's what they are saying. They will not purchase anything outside of Dominion, and it's at $46 a card. I would prefer we table it until we can get this passed and we can go through a bidding process so that at least we won't be stuck with having Dominion cards with Dominion machines.
It's the Dominion machines that we're more worried about than the Dominion cards.
So my concern is that this complete electronic file is required to be retained. And I do not have confidence at this time that it is. And as the rule stands right now, these memory cards can be erased not long after an election. And if they have not retained the complete set of data that are on these memory cards, there's nothing you can do about it. And we all know of 380,761 missing ballot images from Election Day that created a big problem. So if I could be assured that the Secretary of State would make sure that 159 counties are retaining the data off of these memory cards, all of the data, not just the ballot images, but the tabulation and the log files, I would totally support your recommendation. We are taking the risk that come January, the General Assembly may not see fit to fund memory cards.
If I could just add to Dr. Johnston's point, the only thing that you can do, as Dr. Johnston's saying, is to go back to the original paper ballot. And we spent 4 years in court trying to see the Fulton County 2020 ballots. We have met resistance not only from Fulton County, but from the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, who filed an amicus brief in our case. So the ballots, even though we've tried to make them open record, the Secretary of State fought that, and we will not be able to have that available until January 1 of 2025. So that raises the question, what do you do to comply with the law for the November 2024 election and any runoff that might occur? I think that's a really serious question that the voters of the state of Georgia would like an answer to.
Mr. Chairman.
Member Gazal.
Have you examined the ballot image library that is on the Secretary of State's website right now that is supposed to contain all of the ballot images from every election we've had so far in 2024?
We have surveyed and collected all of the ballot images, and what he has on his website are the recount ballot images.
This is 2024, from every election of 2024.
No, we have not surveyed 2024. And one of the problems we had, and that's important, I'm glad you asked the question. We produced a study on March 7th, 2022, after we got the original ballot images. We found out through the metadata, a very complex study, that Fulton County had electronically altered those ballot images before they certified the 2020 election results. So this is a problem. You can't really rely on ballot images. That's why you really have to go back to the actual paper. That's the only independent audit trail of the votes cast in the state of Georgia.
I think we're getting far afield from from this rule, and I want to get back to the rule. Are there any further questions pertaining to this rule from the board? If not, the chair will entertain a motion on this rule.
I'd like to make one more point that the memory card is an original election document. It is required. This is a document that is to be retained for 24 months. So if we're not retaining original election documents, then we're not following Georgia law.
Mr. Chairman,
Member Gazal.
the data is the original document. The storage device is not.
But if the data is not retained.
If the data is not retained, but the storage device is not. So there are many methods of retaining the data that would be compliant with state and federal law. I do not oppose this method of retaining the memory cards. but it is not the only way to comply with it. So if the data itself is being stored, the counties and the state are compliant with federal law.
But that would be a copy of the data. That would not be the original data. And I'm sure Mr. Parikh can explain to you how during a copy, the data can be corrupted. So that's why you have to have the original scanned ballot images to ensure the integrity of the election.
I would like to ask can you explain what happens when you remove the data off the memory card and download it somewhere else? Do we lose information, or what's the concern in doing that?
Well, one, I would like to state that if you post a library and you run it off a web server, the data has been manipulated. It has to be, because the file structure systems for a web server and the way it's hosted is going to change that data. To answer your question, Ms. King, yes, because here's the thing. The data on those SDK cards is supposed to be encrypted. So therefore, to see ballot images, that means that the file was decrypted, and then those files are going to become standalone files and they will get moved. And depending on the type of system that moves it, whether it's a Windows system or a Linux-based system or Unix-based, I'll say, but most everything is Linux now, that will affect your metadata. And that's why sometimes it gets complicated, and Garland's correct on that process. And the data as it resides on that image, like I said, believe me, I've gotten SDK card images, and the very first thing I have to do is check the hash of the image, and then I mount the image and look at it forensically. And sadly, I'm hoping that Georgia's are encrypted. I found states where it's not, and that means that the data could be tampered with while it's on the card, and therefore makes chain of custody. But if it's encrypted properly, the way the vendors say they do it, and they're following their process, then it will go on to EMS and get decrypted, and then it will get moved around from there. And yes, the metadata can change.
Okay. So just to be clear for everyone, so what we're debating basically is whether or not, so if we were to pass this, that would require counties to purchase additional memory cards for this upcoming election. We don't know how many they would have to get. That depends on the county. We don't know which card they would be purchasing. There may be several different cards throughout the counties. And then, but the rule will be enacted. Or do we table it until we can get the legislators to go through the bidding process so we have a uniformed card that everyone will utilize, and it will also fit, it will be cost effective versus just spending $46. And then we can then pass or support this rule to have it stored on those memory cards, because now each county will have enough memory cards. That's kind of the.
I can answer part of your question, Member King. So each county would only need 1 or 2 memory cards to get through this election cycle to the legislative session, and at a cost of about $20 a card per scanner. That's not a whole heck of a lot of money for a county to have to pay to ensure the compliance with federal and state law.
I think we're assuming too that they have a surplus, that the counties have not already, like I said earlier, allocated their funds. However, are you certain it'll be 2 cards, or what are you thinking from what you researched?
Well, I think once you're talking about a full bore election like we've had this year, you've got a primary runoff, and you've got a general and possibly a general election runoff. That's four cards you're going to have for every scanner.
But not to get to the legislative session in January. All you need is 1 card for the runoff, if you even have a runoff, and 1 card for the, we already have the card for the session. So all we're really looking at is a single card per scanner, just in case there's a runoff to get through to the legislative session, because then there's going to be another year before another election is conducted and you would need them again. So 1 card per scanner for probably about $20 if bought in bulk, it's pretty much peanuts to comply with both federal and state law.
If the problem is there's no guidance right now that we can give to the counties about what card to buy or who to buy it from or what to pay for it, or there's just no guidance out there on that issue right now. Trying to implement that before this election is a little
We've got an
much.
expert here. I think he can give us the guidance.
I would like to hear.
Use the mic, Clay. Use the mic, Clay. It pulls out.
Your points, here's what I want to tell you, because I'm an operational person. For large DOD entities, what I'm telling you is you do not want the sloppy global supply chain issues that these vendors have. And I've seen their supply listings, and they're fraudulent in their technical data packages. Your points are very sound. What I want to tell you is when the state purchases them, you're controlled through procurement. To task the counties with doing it individually is asking for chaos, right? but you want to get them, you want to control them, you issue them, and they say issue because you want to ensure they're clean and brand and new, so you don't run the extra steps to make sure they are, which would be the low-level wipe and then doing them. And then as you give them to, after the counties use them, they're surplus, they should store them securely until they're used, and then they put them in. And like Garland said, you don't need that many because they're backup, but you want to have them. Then after they're loaded, they're just like the ballots or anything else. They need security controls on them and to be jacked.
Well, so you bring up a question that I have, because I am not technically savvy as you are on this issue, but how many ballots could one of these cards hold? Could you do 2 elections on that one card? If you can do that, then you've solved the
All right.
problem.
And I don't believe have I given you this stuff before, Garland? All right, so I have the documentation from Dominion that tells that. And so here's the thing, on the 8 gig SDK cards that they talk about, they can hold up to 10,000 a two-sided ballot. So if you have a front and back on your normal ballot, that card can hold that many along with the extra data that's put on the card, because there's log files and other things that are on those cards.
So most of these are 16 gig, 16.
So they're going to be good. And because believe me, there are other questionable things that got when SDK cards got pulled from systems during an election when they obviously weren't full, but that's a whole nother story.
And that's a lot of cards for Gwinnett County or Fulton County or DeKalb County or Cobb County. And with the general election, with maybe a runoff, that's a lot of cards.
But here's the thing, there are 2 SDK cards. One is like the administrative card, which has the encrypted configuration files that give the brains to the ICP2s, the tabulators, the system. The other one is a lot of the data. It holds the image files for the ballots. You're going to have the CVR and all the log data. All those things get backed up on the 2 cards. And so the main thing is you want that one primary card to always, that has the CVR and the ballot images to always be retained.
So, Ms. Favorito, the state election board's technical expert has just stated that we need to go through the proper procurement procedures before we can do this.
Mr. Chair.
Member Johnson.
Could we ask Mr. Kirk to weigh in on his inventory of cards and what he does?
Push your button, Mr. Kirk. Okay.
So I actually don't mind this idea, especially if you're going to provide them to us. I like the retention. One thing to flag, currently our standard practice is up to 10,000 ballots in a scanner. And that's just the guidance. And I think that works with the size of our containers and the size of the secure boxes and bags that we use. The one thing I would like to flag, and Tom may be able to answer this better than I can, is the idea of unscheduled special elections. Going into legislative session, there could be things ordered by the governor, special elections we have to have, and some other things are scheduled next year. Tony, would you mind?
Yeah, we actually have a June special primary for Public Service Commissioner next year. So we're already, in my county alone, we know we're going to have 3 elections at the very minimum. That primary in June could have a runoff in July. And if a third party qualified for Public Service Commissioner, we could even have a special general runoff. So we could have as many as 5 elections next year, because I already know I have a March East Floss and a special city council. So we would just want to, we're in favor of the rule. It's just a matter of making sure we have the supply of cards that we can get through an entire election cycle, which in a nightmare scenario, you could have as many as 14 elections in 2 years.
And Mr. Chairman, we did mention, you mentioned Gwinnett County, we did do a quick cost math. There's about, we think, about 275 counties, scanners in the precincts in Gwinnett. One card, $20 each, would be about $5,000 expenditure to get through to the legislative session. And that's only, you only needed it to have runoff.
One last point in case it wasn't said, sorry if I missed it. No, we cannot reuse memory cards between elections. It has to be static to that election, especially for the retention standards you are talking about.
So basically, what I'm hearing is that by the June special election should be covered based on what takes place in January. So we'll be able to purchase new memory cards by that election. The question is, the memory cards we currently have, is it possible to store those for to use them for this election that's coming up and any election that would take place before session, which I think is just this presidential?
And the
is
runoff.
enough space in the runoff and a runoff?
Yes.
Is it enough space on the cards that we currently have where the counties would not have to purchase any new cards? And if we were to pass this, to store those?
I'm sure Joseph will tell you that they've got to wipe those cards for each election. They have to have a clean card for each election.
Yeah.
Hold on, guys.
So we do need to keep the cards specific to the election. Especially, as I said, with the retention standards we're talking about, I think you'd agree that you want to keep them with the election. There will be a small number of counties that have runoffs in December. There's a potential for unscheduled special elections for legislative seats. It's not really a high number, but it's greater than 0. And it's really hard to predict what the needs for that would be.
Chair would entertain a motion at this time.
I'm still trying to be clear on something. I still want to be clear on something. To be clear, the memory cards that we currently have, that the counties currently have, there's not enough storage space in order to.
There's not enough cards to do a runoff if a runoff occurs.
So they would have to purchase new cards if we were to pass this right
Maybe.
now.
It depends on their inventory. They might have to, or they might not. I imagine they have extra, but maybe not enough.
Might I ask Mr. Kirk, do you store a complete electronic file of?
We transfer everything off memory cards through the Dominion software to the database that's retained. That includes audit logs, images, as well as the results. As far as how many cards we have in our inventory, I apologize. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, but I'm happy to give the information back to you. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be now.
Do you have enough for runoff election?
I don't have enough to have a complete new set for a runoff election. I may have some extras, but I just off the top of my head do not remember the exact numbers.
Do you buy your cards from Dominion?
I'm currently using the cards that were procured with the voting system originally. I'm not sure I've ever bought or purchased additional cards.
I'm sorry.
I'm currently using the cards that were originally provided with the voting system itself. I did not recall if I've ever actually had to purchase additional cards. If I did, I would have purchased them through Dominion, as was the guidance.
So you would buy the $45 card?
Oh, that's crazy. Okay, so because where I am on this is that I think this should be tabled until after session so that the state can procure memory cards and ensure that they are secured, pass them out to the counties so that now they would have enough cards in order to enact this rule.
Would you like to make a motion?
As long as there's no more discussion.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Any more? I know she's thinking. I just want to make sure there's no more discussion. Jane, you got anything? Are you thinking?
You have any more questions?
No more questions.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll make a motion that we table this until after session so that we can ensure that we have a uniform approach to handing out additional memory cards to every county so that we will be able to store this.
We have a motion to defer this rule for further consideration. We have a second? We have a motion and a second to defer SCB Rule 183-1-12-.13 for further consideration. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will vote via voice vote by seniority. Member Gazal?
Aye.
Member Johnston?
Nay.
Member Jeffries? Member King?
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0. Now he's getting angry with the gavel. You promised us 5 minutes on that. I want you to know you're about 40 past that.
I stuck to my 5 minutes. It was y'all that asked all the questions. But they were good questions, and seriously, I want to thank the board for, that was a very serious discussion, and I could tell that every one of you were trying to, accommodate the need, and it just sends a bad optics to voters, not for you, but for the governor and the secretary of state in not funding this board properly, and I know that as a legislature intent.
Okay, how long is your next one going to take?
It,
We're going to write this down.
Okay, so I've got 2 that are combined, and I can do both of them in about 10 minutes, but you'll have to vote on them separately.
We have to vote on them separately, yes.
Yeah, and it's up to you. If you want to come back on Monday, we'll come back, or we can continue.
Oh, we're going to go through it.
I'm easy.
I'm just holding you to your 5 minutes there.
Well,
The next item on the agenda
I
is
did.
discussion and voting on proposed rule amendment. You ever seen that thing where they bring out the hook, and drag you off stage?
Hey.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is discussion and voting on proposed rule, SEB Rule 183-1-14-.02, advanced voting subject to rule reconciliation. Presentation from Garland Favorito. It is number 11 in the board book, tab number 11.
And Mr. Chairman, Tamara is going to help me with this, and she's got another handout for you.
Is she quicker than you are?
Uh,
Maybe.
I don't know. She's a little bit slow today, so you better.
This handout's thicker than the last one.
It is, but I'll go as fast. I need about 10 minutes. I can get through this.
All right.
Since we have shorted Executive Director Cohn, we've got 3 handouts that are for the record that I'm going to be referencing. That's for Executive Director Cohn. Since he hasn't been getting our copies, I apologize for not copying you in on these, Mike. So I'm ready whenever you want
Hang on a
to
second.
proceed, Mr. Chair.
Let me ask the board, because we the board considered this for rulemaking procedures and it passed 4-0 to initiate rulemaking procedures on this. It seems to be a fairly simplistic rule. Is the board going to have any questions on this one in particular? Member Gazal, do you have any issues or questions with this one?
I would ask that the petitioner address the concerns that Gabriel had articulated with this, because their concerns were that it appeared that this gave a very short amount of time for the counties to reconcile any sort of discrepancies when right now under current practice they have close to a week, and this would give it would create a much abbreviated timescale. So if you could address their concerns.
Before we start, Member King, do you have any questions? Member Johnson, do you have any questions ahead of right now? I know that Member Jeffries doesn't. All right, if you will address Member Gazal's, I'm not trying to speed this up or anything.
Well, I need to give you, I can address the questions absolutely, but they're kind of addressed in the presentation. So I just need 10 minutes to recap where we were, and I'll do that as fast as possible. Didn't you give everybody else 10 minutes?
Yeah, but you said 5.
Okay, so I've got two rules here, so I'm trying to address
Okay,
both of the rules in as fast as I can. I know you don't want me to talk much though. No, seriously. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to the problem. The reason that we had this rule, and this is why it's important that time is not, it's really, we need to implement it timely, is because the evidence indicates that the Georgia Dominion Democracy 5.5 system has an intermittent QR code defect that causes in-person ballots accepted by the scanners to not be tabulated. There's no current procedure to detect this, and we proposed simple reconciliation that I think everybody pretty much agreed with for the most part. Reconcile the total ballots accepted by each in-person scanner with the tabulation tape total ballots cast. That will detect a failure in the tabulation to tabulate the ballot. This was discovered. As you recall, a QR code signature mismatch was first found in Dominion on the same system, Democracy 5.5 in Williamson County, Tennessee. They confirmed that the ballots were not tabulated, and not just the Williamson County, but the Tennessee Secretary of State, the Election Assistance Commission, and Dominion Voting Systems all confirmed that that was a legitimate error that caused the ballots not to be tabulated. As a result, the Tennessee Secretary of State discontinued the use of the Dominion system and recommended that in Williamson County replace that Dominion Democracy 5.5, which is the same system we have here, 5.5. Now, there is the Secretary of State's letter. I have it in your package there. I won't talk about it, but he says that due to the urgency of the pending election, we wanted to inform you that it is our recommendation that Dominion voting machines not be used in Williamson County. Dominion has not provided suitable service to the Williamson County Election Commission, and that's all because of this error that we are concerned about. So the question that you want, I'm sure is next on your mind, and Mr. Chairman, you asked me this last time. I wanted to give you a little bit more evidence to show you the urgency of this need. State Election Board 2022-348 showed that the same QR code signature mismatch error was found in 65 of 67 counties that they surveyed. But now the question is, did that mean that the votes were not tabulated? Georgia audits showed that the ballots were not tabulated in sample county survey. I'm going to give you 3 examples. 1,642 ballots were not tabulated in the Gwinnett 2020 election results. 1,805 were not tabulated in DeKalb 2022 District 2 Commission Democratic primary, and then 225 were not tabulated in Coffee County 2020 general elections. I have given you the documents to show this for the record. I'm just going to quickly mention all 3 of those. Here is an affidavit that can be confirmed by the Secretary of State's own summary. And this affidavit in U.S. District Court, sworn under penalty of perjury, says that according to the audit summary published by the Secretary of State, attached here to as Exhibit 1, during the audit, Gwinnett County discovered 1,642 more ballots than what were counted. And this is in regards to the 2020 election. Moving on to the second one, and this would be, I'm not sure which page this is, but on your hand, but the DeKalb County primary. This is a story that most of you remember, but you don't know all the details. So a candidate named Michelle Long Spears came in 3rd in the DeKalb District 2 Commission primary, but she had gotten no votes in the precinct where she and her family lived and voted. She reported that problem to DeKalb Elections, and they tried to rerun the machine count and got the same results. So they postponed certification to do a hand count. This was the only race that was hand count audited in the 2022 election, including the Secretary of State's race. So the results of this are shown in the document that I'm leaving you, but let me just illustrate it for the which page is that? Page 8 that you've got the illustration. So this shows that Michelle Long Pierce was shorted 3,000 of her 4,000 votes, 75% of her votes. 1,400 were given to an opponent, and 1,800 were not counted at all. So that is, now this can be attributed to a ballot alignment problem. And that is what the CAB report does. However, it does not, the report never accounted for the 1,805 votes that were never tabulated. So we know that 1,805 votes were never tabulated. We know 1,642 were not tabulated. This one was in 2022. Gwinnett County is 2020. These are just samples that we have. Here's a third one that's very illustrative. This is the actual Coffee County November 2020 election results spreadsheet that they did. This is on page, is that 10, 9? Page 9. And it says here that we reviewed the results and there were no change in the vote count despite 185 ballots counted. So 185 ballots were counted, were not counted even though they were cast. And then if you look up on the original count, you'll see that the hand count confirmed that another 40 ballots were not counted, not tabulated. So that's a total of 225 ballots not tabulated, and that was also in the 2020 election. So that was the evidence, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to give you because you had asked for that last time and I did not have that. So I apologize for that, but I do appreciate the fact that you were concerned and you wanted to see some more. That said, in order to solve this as a stopgap measure, we proposed two simple reconciliations. I'll probably talk about the first one, the election day first, if that's okay. And the election day simply was to change the recap form to add one column where you reconcile the poll books and the scanner ballot counts. You also reconcile the tabulator tape ballot counts. So instead of a three-way reconciliation, you have a four-way reconciliation. And that's really the only change, a simple modification to the form and a simple additional reconciliation. At the time, they're already doing the reconciliations. And I think that's probably why it passed unanimously. It's a pretty simple ask. Now, I was going to stop there because I know you need to vote on the election day and the early voting separate. There's a couple more things we could talk about in the early voting.
No, I got it. Okay. Yes.
I would actually like to ask one of our election supervisors if the recap forms are already printed.
Let's pick somebody who hadn't been able to speak yet. Do we have any more election supervisors here? Come on, come on.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Kirk, you're back up again.
So, yes and no. They're printed. We have them in our offices, but some of us print them on paper as well. So, I think one point here is, make sure I understand. You want us to compare the number on the screen, is the number that it prints. Is that right?
Time.
Yes.
Plus it's redundant, but
Well, I've just given you the evidence that it's not redundant. The tabulator scanner, if I understand the question or the point, the tabulator scanner, total ballots cast, is not redundant with the scanner ballots cast for the three examples that I've just shown the board.
I think those examples you're talking about, votes counted as opposed to ballots cast.
No.
The county was a program in here, not here, how many ballots were counted.
It was an error in regards to alignment. Now, let me go back to that. So I want to make sure it's clear because we've been hearing this story for year after year on this since 2022. I mean, I agree that you're correct that it was an alignment error in regards to what's on the left-hand side of the system. But on the right-hand side, it shows you 1,805 votes were not counted. And the DeKalb County Board report, which I've left with the board, has no explanation for that. When we looked at the audit logs of SEB 2022-348, it shows that DeKalb County, every one of the ones I just showed you in examples, had QR code signature mismatch errors, and they did not tabulate the ballots.
Well,
and that's why it's not redundant.
2 points, if I may respond, if you don't mind. I think it's important. One, I've talked to some folks about this before. As you know, I do a full hand count of one race in every election I conduct. Those errors are in my audit logs, but the number of ballots always matches when we audit them. The second thing is, I'm curious, these numbers, did you get them from the election night reporting system on the Secretary of State's website? or did you get them from a report from the mini voting system? Because the information on the ENR system on the Secretary of State's website is a version, a copy of those results, but it doesn't display all the data that will be displayed on, say, a statement of votes cast from the server itself. And it's easy to conflate number of ballots cast to number of votes counted if you're just using the information on that website.
Every vote has to be on a ballot. So all of these are actual ballots that were not cast. There's 1,805 ballots that were
I
not
guess
cast.
the easiest way to explain this is, let's say you have two candidates in a race. Candidate A gets 10 votes, candidate B gets 5 votes, and then there's 5 more ballots cast with no votes on. I think if you look online right now, you'll see 15 votes cast, because it's 15 votes for a person. No blank ballots accounted for. Where in DeKalb County, those ballots were considered, I believe, blank by the system and wouldn't have shown up online.
Let me give you an illustration. I think that will clarify this. I'm going to go to the Coffee County in 2020.
And again, where's the data from? Is it from the website or from the voting system?
I'm sorry, from what site?
Is it from the election night reporting website where the results are on
This
the
is,
website? or-
this is the official documentation that the Coffee County Election Board gave to the House Government Affairs Committee on December 10th of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And the board member testified immediately before me. So we've been researching this for years. And what happened there, you can see 40 ballots were not tabulated. The hand count found that there were 40 ballots were not tabulated. Now, to your point, this gives the illusion of an undervote, but it's not an undervote. And that's why there's no conflation of ballots and votes. This was 40 ballots that were not cast. You can see the hand count found that the machine rejected 40 ballots, and the hand count found that every one of those ballots had a presidential vote on it. So the machine rejected, it failed to tabulate 40 ballots, and that's just one simple example. I just pulled 3 for the board. We could have pulled probably dozens, but I didn't want to, since I only have 5 minutes.
And I know I'm cutting into it, I apologize.
That's what it,
Okay. Let me, I think that we don't want to go too far afield again. So, Member Gazal, do you have more comments? Questions?
My only other question is literally, I'm just asking about the forms themselves. Are they in triplicate, or are they just like a single piece of paper? Do you use carbonless copies for that sort of thing? I'm trying to figure out if it would be.
It depends on the county. We're
Okay.
still using those triplicate forms
Okay.
because it's just what we've always done. But a lot of counties have their own forms that they, basically what counties have been doing is when they're doing their logic and accuracy testing, they have an entire workbook so that when they type one seal number on a screen, it populates all of the fields, the necessary fields in their recap sheets, that they're just printing off a recap sheet rather than using the states. It makes it a lot easier to get everything done. And it depends on the county, but we're still using the triplicates. A lot of the smaller counties still are. Some of the larger counties have their own form.
So in order to recreate a form at this point in the process would create a burden?
We would leave it up to SOS. I mean, they would have to
Okay.
give us the form, the counties that don't already have their own, and the counties that have their own would probably do their own, adjustment to their spreadsheet. But yes, a new form would need to be made.
Would we have to recreate a form, or could we just write it on the form that exists and notate where the data is coming from?
I mean, you could theoretically write on the form the number from the states, but that would be part of the poll workers' instructions, that would have to be added.
Just add that.
Easier if it's on the form, push them, fill it out.
Exactly.
Either way.
Could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Aren't these forms required to be handwritten?
Are you referring to the seal numbers themselves or at the poll?
At the poll?
Yes, ma'am. Those are the totals themselves are, and those are the seal numbers that the poll workers write in on election night. But the seal numbers that the poll workers are expected to see in the morning when they get there, the counties are using their spreadsheets to print those as a way of making it easier to generate all the forms. Because when you're doing in Fulton County alone, you have over 400 different precincts, and you're generating these forms to make it a more seamless procedure.
Okay. It is easy, but there,
Right.
at the poll, there's a handwritten confirmation of the counts that are seen. So simply, it is, the Secretary of State, I'm sure, could generate a form quickly. And you just need one more column for the number on the tabulator table.
Right. That would just require another column.
Right, no problem.
Any further questions from the board? The chair will entertain a motion on this SEB Rule 183-1-14-.02.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt Rule 183-1-14-.02.
We have a motion to adopt the rule. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any no discussion? All those in favor of adopting Rule SCB, Rule 183-1-14-.02, we will vote via voice by seniority. Member Gazal?
Nay, simply because I think the administrative burden this late in the game is not worth the benefit.
Member Johnson?
Aye.
Member Jeffries?
Aye.
Member King?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1.
Mr. Chairman, I think I was presenting the election day, and I think that y'all have approved the advanced voting, which is fine. That's fine with me. We can just.
Wait.
But,
You don't want to confuse your chairman. Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
but we can talk about them. Or we can just pass this one and go home.
Did you say you want to pass on the next rule?
No, I said, I think that y'all passed the advanced voting reconciliation versus the election day, which I think we were actually talking. But it's, since you're probably going to pass it anyway, let's
We just passed 183-1-14-.02.
Yeah, technically, that's the
What?
advanced voting.
Right.
We can,
Correction to the record, Mr. Chair.
well, we can talk about it, and then you may not have to revote it.
Wait. We went and did 183-112.13, which is number 13. Then we went back to number 11, which was 183-114.02. And now we should be on 12, which is 183-112-.12.
Yeah, actually, the recap form in question was on the election day form.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you want to proceed. You could probably just adopt 183-112-12, and then we can go home.
Well, hang on a second here.
Same difference, is that what you're saying?
Well,
There's a very minor difference in the two.
this board voted on number 11, 183-1-14.02. That was the one that we voted on. We passed it already.
Okay, great.
All right.
Well, then there's nothing different about 183-112-12, so I think you could probably just call for the vote.
The board will entertain a motion on SCB Rule 183-1-12-.12, which is tab 12 in your board binder, unless you have questions for Mr. Favorito.
I would reiterate my request that you address the concern on the rule that we just passed, apparently. But I would still appreciate an explanation of the 1 hour to reconcile versus the time that they currently have.
Well, the time, I don't believe it's going to be, I don't know, did you say, 1 hour to reconcile one field? I'm not sure that that's really accurate, but let's assume that it was. We're talking about a voting system that doesn't count correctly. And we're talking about spending, I don't even think it'd be an hour, probably less than that, half an hour, just to change a three-way reconciliation into a 4. So that is trivial when you compare. I mean, I'm sitting here showing you 3,500 ballots that were never tabulated for the QR code. So at some point in time, and I remember King said this earlier very well, that what you really want and what the people of Georgia want is they want an accurate election. They don't want a quick election. So and that's what it's all about. Is the accuracy of the results more important than an election official spending a half an hour more to ensure his own results are correct? That's where we are. This is why there's been a break between the Georgia voters and some of the elections officials, particularly the board of the area. So hopefully we'll repair that one day. But what we want accurate elections. This is about accurate elections, and we appreciate that the board. Most of you, I know you want accurate elections too.
Member King, did I hear you call for a question? Call for the question?
No, I said I'm ready to make a motion.
You called for the question.
Oh, yeah, I called for the question.
We have a call for the question. The board will, or the chair will entertain a motion on this rule.
I make a motion, we approve.
Member King has made a motion that we, this board approve SCB Rule 183-1-12-.12. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second from Member Jeffries. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will vote by voice vote in order of seniority. Member Gazal, how do you vote?
Which one are we voting on now?
We're voting on 183-1-12-.12, which is tab number 12.
which is the one that I thought I had voted no on. So this is the one I thought I was voting on before. So I am going to vote no, simply to be consistent.
We'll vote nay.
Nay.
For those a nay. Member Johnson?
Aye.
Aye. Member Jeffries? Member King?
Aye.
It's passed 3-1.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to vote aye also?
You can't talk anymore. You well exceeded your 5 minutes. It's, you're way over time right now. The next items on the agenda are old business and new business. A member of the board, the chair would entertain a motion from a member of the board on how to handle the old business and new business. And what we will do today, depending on this motion, is we will hear from those individuals that signed up to speak that did not get to speak this morning. Member King?
Yeah, I make a motion that we hear old business and new business on Monday, because we do have an executive session that's also on the agenda, and we need our attorneys to be present for that. So that would have to take place on Monday as well. So that's my.
We have a motion from Member King to move the old business and new business to Monday morning to be heard by this board. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of moving old business and new business to Monday morning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye also. That carries vote 5-0. The last thing on the agenda is to hear from those members of the public that signed up to speak this morning.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
point of order. We amended you'll hear the petition by
morning.
Ms. Grubbs on Monday.
yes.
All right, and Ms. Frazier has to.
Ms. Frazier's already been, we've already discussed it with Ms. Frazier. Yes, yes, yes. Pardon me? So anybody who signed up to speak this morning will now get to speak for public comment section. And so Executive Director Cohen will call out the names of those people who are still here, and this board will listen to the remainder of the public comment.
Okay, everybody, if you would, please listen for your name if you're still here. So you can go ahead and just get up, raise your hand, and come get in line, please. Carter Augustine. Okay, Maria Galdo. Sally Grubbs is here in the house. Jennifer Moore. Mr. Bush. Not George. Earl Ferguson. Tracy Moore. Marjorie Timmer. Shannon Ferguson. Cynthia Battle. Paul Hershey. Vic Tripp. Cynthia Willingham. George Babona. Bob Cummings. Wanda Cooper. Betsy Shackelford. Brad Binkley. Not seeing anybody here. Brandy Burke Banks. Dorothy Kirkley. Excuse me. Joey McKinnon. Michael Kincaid. That list got very short. All right. If you guys would, when you get up there, just go ahead and state your name for the record. That way we know who you are, because I've called out a lot of names. Sally, would you like to lead us off? You've got the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Sally Grubbs, and I'm the Cobb County Republican Party Chairwoman. And so I am on the agenda for new business on Monday, correct?
Yes.
Before I say what I have to say, I just want to be sure. The one thing that I wanted to address in public comment today was the Atlanta Press Club event that I went to last week. I really wanted to hear what former Governor Roy Barnes and Nathan Deal and Senator Saxby Chambliss and Mayor Shirley Franklin had to say about this Project Democracy initiative that they are doing. And I was really, really sad to hear some of the things that were said. I was kind of sad about the whole event. But I talked to a lot of press, and I have a lot of questions from press, particularly with the rules. And number one, I think it's very unfair that there's this narrative that unfortunately Gavrio seems to be going along with, and some of the election directors, about this board is so radical because there's MAGA Republicans. And I can tell you, looking at each and every one of the people sitting on this board, I would never say, oh, they're MAGA. You know, it's just, I mean, Ms. King knows exactly what I mean. It's not that. And there's this narrative that is a very dangerous narrative that the press is putting out there, and they're not being held to account. And I would say it's incumbent upon this board to hold them to account when they're not, like, for instance, in the rule proposal that I presented back in July, the big narrative is that we're trying to delay certification, and it's anything but that. And in fact, at the end of the paragraph of that rule, it says, and shall certify by 5:00 p.m. on the Monday following the election. So there are a lot of lies, the just out and out lies that people have put out. And I could name the reporters, but it is a very dangerous game that people in this room that come to report on these topics are putting out there. And the election directors are not holding them to account. And I've shared with the chairman some of the things that I've gotten in the mail. He's gotten in the mail that shut down in-person board meetings, and the press that is given preference in this room with reserved seating needs to stop, because this is about the people of Georgia. This is not about the press. And so I would just ask that you guys stop giving preference to the press, because all you're doing is ginning up more hatred, more disinformation, and that kind of thing. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I'll see you Monday.
Thank you, Ms. Grubbs. I always appreciate your comments. Who do we have next?
Hello.
I state your name.
Earl Ferguson,
All right,
and
Thank
I
you.
challenge voters in Fulton County, registered individuals who have moved outside of the state of Georgia and registered or have voted elsewhere. Last fall, I told the chairman of the Registration and Election Board that it looked like we had more people than we had adults in the county, and she said that's not right. So I challenged in December, challenged about 1,800 people that had moved to North Carolina, registered to vote there, and all of my challenges were denied. And later this year, I challenged 2,000 who had moved to Florida and had already voted down there, and those challenges were denied. In 2020, I did the same thing. In North Carolina, all of my challenges were approved. There's a reason for that, and we need to think about what that reason is. Why does the system not want to remove ineligible voters? And these are ineligible if they've moved out of the state and they've done something like register or vote. They are ineligible to vote in Georgia. Similar situations have occurred in several other counties besides Fulton. I know that DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett, right in the metro area, have, but also Forsyth and Chatham, and I understand Bibb County has the same thing, where you have a lot of population. It seems to be the same thing happening. And it needs to be stopped. The registration system needs to remove ineligible voters. I have challenges for my two that have been filed here, and I would like to hear them treated properly and taken care of. Is the Atlanta Journal still present? Oh, shucks. And on August the 30th, there was an article in the Atlanta Journal that said my challenges had been approved as eligible in the December challenges. They weren't approved because they were eligible. They were approved because the registration board did not care whether they were eligible or not. Thank you for your attention. I have to go home and feed the dog.
Good afternoon. My name is Joey McKinnon. I'm Director of Georgia Values Action, and I appreciate the opportunity to get some thoughts in here just under the buzzer. We represent working families who vote in Georgia. Our goal is to help working families get ahead, not just get by through good kitchen table policy. But to do that, we want democracy to work for working families, which includes ensuring busy and stretched-thin families do not have unnecessary hurdles to voting, and that their vote count, so that they can elect the representatives that best suit their economic needs. Several rules that have been proposed today are not in keeping with that latter priority for the following reasons. And you've heard a lot of these sentiments today, so I'll try to keep them brief, but like too many proposals before the board this year, it increases the workload of poll workers, which could make elections more difficult and more potential for error. That's why our senior election administrators are opposed to these measures. I heard them say as much on the radio yesterday. Unnecessary delays could result, and these proposals complicate what could be straightforward procedures, such as chain of custody procedures already in place and already sufficient. They create more frequent handling and unsealing of ballots, which could reduce security, not enhance it. Implementing new rules this close to the national election erodes voter confidence, not the other way around. Georgia's elections are safe and secure. That dead horse has been beaten legislative session after session. Personally, I don't think these actions are a careful consideration of a well-founded concern. I think it's a way to cast a cloud of suspicion over our election system and a way to create a false narrative. Our election in Georgia has already started. Ballots are going out, and we should not be rewriting the rules with 25 days to go to advance voting. I encourage you on Monday to cease further changing our processes in the middle of an election. And I thank you for your time.
Sir, could you state your name again for the record?
I had said it was Joey McKinnon, Georgia
Thank you.
Values Action.
Thank you so much. Just want to make sure we got it.
Short. Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Moore.
Tracy Moore.
Thank you for listening to public comments today. As I mentioned, my name is Tracy Moore, and I'm simply a concerned citizen of DeKalb County. I'm also trained as a mechanical engineer, and I volunteer with the American Bar Association Democracy Task Force. This is my first time speaking here, and I've gotten such an education in the last few months about election board, but it's complex. That's one thing I've learned. I wanted to share one correction because I started my training yesterday in DeKalb County as a poll worker. And one thing I learned that is different than what I heard today is that the discrepancy between a voter that votes and on the machine and the number that comes from the ballot after it scans, there are valid reasons to be different. And I was actually coached about that. And what that is if somebody votes and changes their mind or says, I don't want to put my ballot in, I'm pissed, or I couldn't write in, Mickey Mouse, then I don't want to put my ballot in. So there are valid reasons. And my job as a poll worker will be to make sure they know their vote does not get counted. It's not counted if it's not scanned. So there are valid reasons for discrepancies. That's just one example, but I think overall my frustration with all this is that it's very anecdotal. As an engineer, I hear bits of pieces of this, and what about that? And if the purpose of this group is to find uniformity, why isn't it coming from the bottoms up with data? How are you doing it today? What are the best practices? How do we share them as opposed to top down with rules that somebody thought this was a good idea and then we ignore the people that are making it? So I'm just really disappointed as a voter and a citizen that this is the way we behave. So I just had to share those remarks, but most concerning is that we've ignored our legislators and voters. They're the voters put these people into office. They've made the laws, and now we're making changes. And I think that's disrespectful and rude. And I look forward to changes in the future. I don't know how it's going to happen, because surely it doesn't happen by us standing up here and speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate your comments. Next up, you state your name, please.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Michael Kincaid. I am a Fulton County resident. I was also a poll worker and a poll manager in the 2020 and 22 cycles. I will keep this very brief since it's the end of the day. Serving in the capacity of poll manager in Fulton County, I was really impressed by the seriousness and the commitment to the democratic process that I saw, both from my team of poll workers at my location, from the other poll managers that I worked with at nearby locations. I would say that also goes for the full-time county staff, with the officials that we worked with those that did our training, that wrote up our materials. The rules are complex. The election law is complex. I would say everybody who chose to participate in the process, we certainly don't do it for the money or the fame or the glory. Everyone involved takes pride in doing it right, in being thoughtful, in really doing the training, reading the manuals, understanding the material, following the law, and providing good customer service. To that end, I would say the training process, the instructions, the manuals, the training, really clear understanding for everybody involved, for our assistant managers, was really, really important. And so because of that, I would say I oppose making these kinds of rule changes so late in the cycle when everyone has already started to do the training and to learn how to do things as they stand today. I think that many of these rules, kind of on their own merits, with enough time to think through them, are good and are things that I would support. But when we're already training people and learning how to do things, it's just too late in the process. And so I know that some of those actions have already been taken today, but I would say going forward, I would really be supportive of something like maybe a 90-day quiet period. I think it's really a lot easier for our teams to execute correctly, to understand the rules, and to be really consistent when those rules are, stated in writing, and there's not something new kind of coming overnight when they arrive at the poll site on election day. Thank you.
Hello. On October 3rd, 2023, SEB Acting Chair Matt Mashburn made a monumental declaration.
Has adopted a policy recently since last December last year that we're trying to clear cases off the calendar and move through them quickly. And one of the hard choices that the board was forced to make is the decision to whether or not to continue a policy of allowing the complainants to present on the case or not. And so that's just one of the tough choices that the board had to make, was that the complainants do not traditionally speak on the matters. And so it's the board's investigation that's being heard.
So what he's referring to is a statement that was made on December 13th, 2022 by SEB Chairman Judge Duffy. And let me get you that there real quick.
As I've explained to others, in cases where a determination is made that it be dismissed because there's not sufficient allegation to move forward, we do not allow complainants to speak, because the complainant is the one who initiates the action, is supposed to have given us everything that we needed to know to make a determination on how to process it. And in fact, we have been pretty generous with people that want to add information to their complaints after they file it for us to consider. And so as far as we're concerned, the complainant in this case has had sufficient opportunity to present whatever they have for us to make a decision.
So there's two major problems with what Matt Mashburn is inflicting upon the Georgia voters and the SEB. One, there's absolutely no documentation of the SEB voting on that major change. Okay. Two, Duffy stated that only complainants in cases that were being dismissed don't get to speak. Matt Mashburn unilaterally expanded that to all complainants for all SEB cases. Okay. I know this firsthand because they did it to me. I had a recent case. It was SEB case 2022-217. I was the complainant. I didn't get to speak. It was not dismissed. Cobb County got issued a letter of instruction. I didn't get to present damning, information. And this unconstitutional SEB rule cannot stand. Now let's get out of here.
Thank you, George. We appreciate your comments and your work you do every time. Well, that concludes all our speakers, unless the GSP wants to speak. He said, no, thank you. Well, happy Friday evening to you guys. John, you're. I'm sorry?
This, it'll conclude our session for today. We'll take a vote on recessing in a second and reconvening Monday morning at 9:30 in this room. Do we have a motion to recess? We have a motion to recess. Do we have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. The motion carries. This board is recessed until 9:30 Monday morning. Thank you. 9:30.
I agree with you.
Would you like to learn a brand new and innovative way to invest your extra money that has a low barrier to entry and low competition? What if I told you that it is a guaranteed method to get up to 18 to 20% return on your investment? Tax lien and deed purchasing is the only way to get into the real estate market through the back door. No credit and no loans needed. This method isn't commonly taught, and therefore the competition is very low, for now. Put together a 14-hour info-packed course which will teach you everything you'll need to know to get started. Learn at your own pace, step-by-step guided video and aids to start you on the TLC deed investment process. The course offers many learning tools for new investors, helping ensure you safely invest in tax liens and deeds. Contact us today and join the buyback team.